Chapter 17:15. In the beginning, Murong Fu was still able to catch up to Song Qing-shu, but as time went on, he seemed to be just a little bit behind. He wasn't stupid, so he finally realized that this was a ploy to lure the tiger away from the mountain. So he hastily changed direction and rushed back. When he finally returned to the proclamation envoy's residence, he was stopped by Bao Budong and Feng Polio just as he was about to enter. He asked curiously, "Why are you stopping me?" Feng Polio said angrily, "Young master, you are really muddle-headed today. How could you admit that you killed Lu Changhua and Yang Jiyuan in front of so many people?" Murong Fu was confused. "When did I admit it? We saw it with our own eyes. Young master was too careless and fell into Shun Xiaolong's trap. I didn't expect him to be so cunning and invite officials to hide next door," Bao Budong said as he shook his head and sighed. This was the closest they were to restoring their country, but they failed at the last step. "I didn't even see Shin Xiaolong just now." Murong Fu was also anxious. Seeing that Murong Fu did not seem to be lying, Bao Budong and Feng Finge looked at each other and told him what had happened. Murong Fu also told them about his encounter with the mysterious man. Only then did they know that they had fallen into the other party's trap. Damn it, who's so wicked? After knowing what happened, Feng Poli couldn't help but curse. Murong Fu was in a daze. One must know that he had been standing at the peak of his life just a moment ago. Yet, in the next moment, he had fallen into a bottomless abyss. In the entire world, there were very few people who could remain indifferent. Bao Budong was the calmest and said hurriedly, "Young master, since things have come to this, we should leave quickly." Murong Fu was enraged. "I was so close to restoring Yin, and you want me to leave just like that?" Bao Budong sighed and said, "Young master, rumors about you killing Lu Changhua and Yang Jiyuan have been spreading everywhere. But because there is no evidence, it is not a big deal." But this time, the person who pretended to be young master and admitted it personally. Moreover, he pretended to be unaware of it and was heard by almost all the officials in Sichuan. This is irrefutable evidence. Now that the people of Sichuan are agitated, even if young master were to jump out and explain the whole story, no one would believe you. Murong Fu said unwillingly, "Are you going to give up without even trying?" "Young master, where there's life, there's hope." Bao Budong was a little anxious when he saw that he still didn't understand the situation. At this time, a group of people appeared at the corner of the intersection. Someone with sharp eyes saw them and immediately shouted, "Bastard Murong Fu is here, kill him." Hearing this, the whole street seemed to be boiling, and people kept running out. Seeing this, Murong Fu finally understood that the situation was hopeless, so he gritted his teeth and began to run away with his family. In the next few days, impeachment memorials from Sichuan flew to Lin, and like snowflakes. Shun Xiaolong had the credit of pacifying Wu Shi, and now he had the credit of exposing Murong Fu's true colors. In addition, he was a prestigious general in Sichuan, so he was naturally chosen as the temporary leader by the officials. He only needed to wait for the official appointment from the imperial court to be officially issued. On the Mirror Lake, Yuan Xingzhu was peeling grapes and feeding the man lying on the couch, while she asked, "Do you think Jia Shidao will issue the appointment?" This man was, of course, Song Qing-shu, who had been very powerful recently. Yuan Xingzhu changed the way she addressed him. On the one hand, she admired him for being able to settle Sichuan in such a short time, and on the other hand, his title of Prince of Qi was granted by the imperial court, which was partly due to Han Xingzhou's contribution. She comforted herself that she was working for Minister Han, not betraying him. The grape juice in his mouth flowed freely, and Song Qing-shu was so satisfied that he almost cried out. His life was really rotten. One must know that in the past, when the despot was portrayed in the television dramas, most of the scenes were like this, where he was lazily lying on the couch, surrounded by all kinds of beautiful women, and his slender white hands peeled grapes and sent them into his mouth one by one. The question from the beauty next to him interrupted his reminiscence. He answered, "Now, Sichuan has gone through several major upheavals in just a month, and it can't afford any more. Even if Jia Shidao is unwilling, he has to acknowledge Shun Xiaolong's position." Moreover, the emperor won't allow him to do whatever he wants. The imperial court of Lin and can't risk losing Sichuan again by sending a high-ranking official to take over. For now, stability is the priority. Of course, Song Qingshu smiled. The imperial court of Lin and will definitely send some officials over. Maybe in 2 or 3 years, Sichuan will fall back into the control of Lin. But for now, it seems that Shun Xiaolong is the most powerful official in Sichuan. Ruan Xingzhu also smiled happily. Now, the power in Sichuan is firmly controlled by Shun Xiaolong, the Ruan family, and the Yang family. The Ruan family and the Yang family follow Young Master's lead, and Young Master has saved Shun Xiaolong's life. Now, Young Master is the true master of Sichuan. Song Qingshu smiled faintly. He didn't take her deliberate flattery to heart. It was no problem for him to influence the situation in Sichuan to a certain extent, but it was complete nonsense to say that he had complete control of the entire Sichuan. The Ruan family and the Yang family were in a honeymoon period with him, but they hadn't completely surrendered to him. As for Shin Xiaolong, they weren't subordinates, so he was still far from controlling Sichuan. Unless the key departments in Sichuan, such as military power, personnel power, and financial power, were all controlled by his subordinates, he wouldn't be able to completely control it. Shun Xiaolong is also a warmonger. Recently, we have been training our troops and looking for a chance to go on a northern expedition. I hope we can alleviate Minister Han's crisis. Yuan Xingzhu continued to sketch out the future plan. Her eyes were shining, and she was in high spirits. Song Qingshu frowned secretly. The army in Sichuan going on a northern expedition against the Jin Kingdom was something he didn't want to see. But Yuan Xingzhu was loyal to Han Xingzhu, so he couldn't stop her and disappoint her. Besides, Shun Xiaolong was dedicated to the country. Naturally, he wanted to go on a northern expedition to fight for more benefits for the imperial court. Thinking of the problems he was about to face, Song Qingshu couldn't help but feel a headache. Before the previous wave subsided, another wave arose. At this moment, an urgent report suddenly arrived. As Ruan Xingzhu was peeling grapes for Song Qingshu, it was inconvenient for her to speak to the person outside the door. However, what she heard next made her completely unaware that the grapes in her hand had fallen to the ground. Chapter 17:16. Ruan Xingzhu didn't believe it at first. She confirmed it with the spy again and again, and then she learned that it was true. It had happened 2 or 3 days ago, and the Ruan family had sent a messenger pigeon along the way. Xiaozhan, Song Qingshu frowned. He had stayed in Linen for a while, and the name sounded strange to him. However, the people he had been dealing with back then were either princes or ministers of state. Even if he had seen such an official, he wouldn't have had any impression of him. How could Xiaozhan have the guts to do that? It must be Jia Shidao's doing, Ruan Xingzhu said with hatred. She clenched her fists so hard that her knuckles turned white. Song Qingshu still shook his head. As far as I know, the Jin Kingdom wouldn't ask for Han Xingzhou's head. They don't want a full-scale war with the Southern Song dynasty, so they wouldn't ask for the head of the Southern Song dynasty's officials. Back in Jiangling Prefecture, Ruan Xingzhu had personally witnessed the Jin Kingdom's cavalry annihilating a group of experts from the Isle of Heroes. Although Song Qingshu had never mentioned anything about it, she was smart and meticulous enough to guess that he must have some connection and influence with the Jin Kingdom. Of course, no matter how imaginative she was, she would never have guessed that he was the one in charge of the Jin Kingdom. Therefore, when she heard what he said, she believed that the Jin Kingdom had no intention of taking Han Xingzhou's head. It must be Jia Shidao who colluded with the envoy to tell this big lie. Ruan Xingzhu bit her lip so hard that it almost bled. The Han faction and the Jia faction had been fighting for years, and now they had ended up like this. She couldn't accept it. All the officials in the court didn't know what was going on in the Jin Kingdom, so they were fooled by him. Seeing that it was done, they had to acquiesce to his behavior for the sake of the big picture. But Han Xingzhou had so many masters and guards around him. How could he be killed so easily? Song Qingshu was confused. Han Xingzhou had been saved by Ling Hu Chong on his way to Yangzhou. Since then, he had strengthened the guards around him. Every time he traveled, there were several masters half a step to the supreme power realm. Even the masters from the Isle of Heroes under Jia Sherdao might not have been able to kill him, let alone Xia Zhen. If Jia Sherdao really had the ability to destroy Han Xingzhou's body easily, he wouldn't have been at a disadvantage after fighting with him for so many years. Moreover, he was doing it inside the palace. Even if there were fewer guard around Han Zhou, there was still the unfathomable Huang Chong in the palace. How could he allow Jia Sherdao to do as he pleased? Wan Xingzhou suddenly exclaimed, "I remember now. A few days ago, Zhuolin Chan and that Shi Patian suddenly left Chengdu. At that time, we were wondering why they were transferred away when the situation in Sichuan was so unstable. Now, it seems like they have something more important to do, and that is to assassinate Minister Han." Song Qing-shu was startled, feeling that her speculation was somewhat reasonable. With Shi Potion's current level of martial arts, although he might not be able to defeat Huang Chong, it would not be a problem for him to stop him. Then he could ask the other masters to surround and kill Han Kuangzhou, who at that time did not have much protection. Wan Xingzhou gritted her teeth and abruptly stood up. Then she directly knelt on the ground and bowed to the other party. "Your Highness, do you still remember our agreement?" Song Qing-shu was startled. "What agreement?" Wan Xingzhou replied. "Back in Jiangling, you said that the fall of Minister Han was inevitable. If he fell, I would bring the Ruan family to you." Song Qing-shu had actually thought of this, but she had just heard such bad news, so it was not convenient to mention it in front of her. Before he had time to answer, Wan Xingzhou continued, "From now on, I will bring the Ruan family and the Yang family to worship you as our master. My only request is that you can kill Jia Sherdao in the future to avenge Minister Han." As she spoke, she shed tears. The Han family has been a great benefactor to the Ruan family for generations. Now that Minister Han has fallen to such a state, how can I not do anything? Song Qing-shu nodded and said in a deep voice, "Okay, I promise you." It was not an impulsive decision. He had thought about it carefully. First of all, gaining her loyalty was equivalent to gaining the top royal merchant in the world and half of Sichuan. Second of all, his interests with Jia Sherdao could not be reconciled, so there was bound to be a life-and-death battle in the future. "Thank you, my lord." Ruan Xingzhou was worried that he would not agree so easily because Jia Sherdao was too powerful. Now, she was overjoyed. Song Qing-shu grabbed her weak arm and helped her up. "But I have to say this first. I will avenge you in the future when the time is right, but I will not fight Jia Sherdao for you now." Wan Xingzhou replied softly, "I understand that. I'm not the kind of woman who pesters others endlessly, and I will not harm the interests of my lord for my former master." Song Qing-shu couldn't help but feel that mature women were really understanding. He did not need to say much to her, and she would naturally understand. At this moment, Pearl suddenly reported from outside the door, Madam, Shun Xiaolong wants to see you." "Shun Xiaolong?" Song Qing-shu raised his eyebrows. "Hurry up and invite him in." "No, let's go out and greet him." In ancient times, Cao Cao welcomed Su Yu without wearing shoes. Although he did not have to be so deliberate, he still had to show his respect. The Mirror Lake was now docked by the shore, and Shun Xiaolong stood alone on the dock this time. Soon he was invited in. Song Qing-shu was a little confused. General Shun is now concerned about the safety of Sichuan. "Why did you go out alone?" "We don't know where Murong Fu is now. Maybe he's hiding somewhere to ambush you." Murong Fu's actions were exposed. Not only could he not be the deputy Xianfu of Sichuan, but he also did not dare to return to Swallow Dock in the south of the Yangtze River. Now, no one knew where he was. Shun Xiaolong sighed and said, "It is not a big deal to go out alone. I will probably be alone in the future." "What do you mean?" Song Qing-shu did not understand. It should be known that he was now the #1 official in Sichuan. When he went out, he would have a group of guards, not to mention that he was surrounded by people. Moreover, the Imperial Court of Lin and had not revealed any news of replacing him. "I've decided to give up my post and go look for my family." Shun Xiaolong sighed, revealing a deep sense of exhaustion. "General Shun has a promising future. Why did you leave at this time?" Ruan Xingzhu could not help but ask. Shun Xiaolong said with a wry smile, "You two should know what happened in the south of the Yangtze River, right?" Song Qingshu and Ruan Xingzhu looked at each other. They did not expect that they would get the news so soon. However, with his current status, he must have his own sources of information. As far as I know, General Shun should not be on the side of Han Xingzhou. Why? Song Qingshu was confused. I am neither on the Han faction nor on the Jia faction. I am only loyal to this country. Shin Xiaolong unconsciously raised his voice as he said, "But look at the imperial court now. The prime minister sacrificed the interests of the country for power and let countless soldiers and civilians die in vain. Moreover, the imperial court even acquiesced to Jia Shidao's behavior in order to make peace with the Jin kingdom. They gave the head of the officials to the enemy country. It is an unprecedented shame. I have completely given up on such a country and such a minister. That's why I decided to abandon my post and go save my poor cousin." "Who is your cousin, General Shun?" Ruan Xingzhu asked curiously. Chapter 17:17. Song Qingshu was startled, and his expression suddenly became strange. "Is the cousin General Shun mentioned, Shin Bijuan?" Shin Xiaolong was also quite surprised. "Your Highness knows her maiden name?" It should be known that in this world, the names of the unmarried ladies were known only to the closest people. But on second thought, as a prince, it was reasonable for the other party to know this secret. "I learned it by chance." Song Qingshu thought, "I know more than her maiden name." Suddenly, he thought of something and couldn't help but ask, "By the way, General Shun is a member of the Shanin Shin family. Why have I never heard of it?" Shin Xiaolong said with a bitter smile, "Alas, I was unfilial when I was young. I made a mistake and was driven out of the family. After all these years, it's normal that outsiders don't know that I used to be a member of the Shun family." Song Qingshu thought of his nickname, Three Emotions Taoist Priest. He was afraid that what happened in the past was related to love. It was most likely a sad thing for him, so he didn't ask in detail. Shun Xiaolong continued, "Although my name was removed from the Shun family's genealogy, I am a member of the Shun family in life and a ghost of the Shun family in death. When the Shun family was in glory, I naturally wouldn't touch the family's glory. But now that the Shun family has been destroyed, I can't sit back and do nothing. Originally, when I heard the news of the Shun family's accident a few months ago, I planned to investigate it. But the northern expedition is imminent, and there are unforeseen events in Sichuan. I can't abandon righteousness for a small family, so I can only continue to stay here. Now that the matter in Sichuan is over, it's time to save my poor cousin." Speaking of this, he suddenly said angrily, "Cousin disappeared inexplicably. The imperial court's search and rescue operation ended in vain, and then the Shun family was destroyed, but the imperial court still didn't care about it. It's really disappointing." These words had been bottled up in his heart, suppressed by the values of loyalty and patriotism. But this time, what happened in Sichuan and what happened in Lin and made him so disappointed that he didn't have the usual reverence for the imperial court. Instead, he was full of dissatisfaction. Naturally, he couldn't help but pour out the words from the bottom of his heart. "My condolences, General Shun," consoled Ruan Xingzhu. Shin Xiaolong suddenly let out a long sigh. "The dead are already gone, but my cousin's sister's whereabouts are still unknown. Thinking about her beauty, she must have suffered a lot of hardships and humiliation. But no matter what, I must think of a way to rescue her. Only then can I comfort my father and uncle's spirits in heaven." Ruan Xingzhu couldn't help but say, "The crown princess has mysteriously disappeared. The Imperial City Department has sent so many people, but none of them have found her. Where are you going to find her?" Shun Xiaolong snorted coldly. "Although I alone can't compare to the Imperial City Guards in terms of numbers, I have more perseverance than them. They only search for less than a month before giving up, but I can search for a year, a lifetime. Even if I have to travel to the ends of the earth, I must rescue my cousin." Ruan Xingzhu sighed and said, "But it's been so long. The crown princess is a delicate and beautiful woman. She's most likely dead. Actually, Miss Shun is very safe now." Song Qingshu suddenly interrupted. "What?" not to mention Shen Xiaolong. Even Ruan Xingzhu looked at him in shock. "Does your highness know the whereabouts of my sister?" Shen Xiaolong asked expectantly. Song Qingshu nodded and said, "That's right. In fact, I also have a rough idea of the ins and outs of your sister's disappearance." Shen Xiaolong hurriedly said, "I hope your highness can tell me." Even Ruan Xingzhu, who was at the side, was waiting for him to explain with curiosity. After all, even with the intelligence network under Han Xingzhou's command, they still couldn't find out where Shun Bijuan had gone. It had always been an unsolved mystery. Song Qingshu explained while thinking about the wording. When Miss Shin was kidnapped, it was because of the Shun family's deer cutter. It is said that the deer cutter hides the secret of invincibility in the world. Whoever has the deer cutter will have the world. Both of you should know that in Lin, Prince Yi has always coveted the crown prince's position. How could he tolerate the crown prince getting the beauty and a divine object like the deer cutter at the same time? So he organized a carefully prepared assassination to kill Miss Shun. But he didn't expect that Xiao 11th Lang would come out of nowhere. Yalu Yisin of Liao also wanted the deer cutter, so he sent Xiao 11th Lang over. In the chaos, he kidnapped Miss Shun with the deer cutter. Shun Xiaolong exclaimed. She was taken to Liao? Song Qingshu nodded, and Ruan Xingzhu, who was at the side, had a look of realization. No wonder we couldn't find any news about her. You couldn't find anything? I don't think so, Song Qingshu said with a faint smile. Later, the Shui people of the Imperial City Department knew that Miss Shun was in Liao. Jia Zhen and Qin Keqing should also know that they went to Liao. But they didn't report it to the court, Ruan Xingzhu said with a frown. She realized that they were all backed by Jia Sherdao. Not only did they not report it, but the Shui people even tried to kill Miss Shun, Song Qingshu said calmly. I saved her from the Shui people. What? As a general in the military, Shun Xiaolong had naturally heard of the Shui people. He knew that the Shui people never missed. If he didn't know that it was Song Qingshu who saved her, he believed that his sister would definitely be dead. Why did the Shui people want to kill my sister? Shun Xiaolong was shocked and angry, but he was more confused. Song Qingshu sighed. This is the ruthlessness of the imperial family. Because young Lady Shun is the crown prince's imperial concubine, but was kidnapped for such a long time. She is also an outstanding beauty, and even if she maintained her purity, how would the world believe that nothing had happened? How could the royal family allow such a stain on the crown princess? Shen Xiaolong's gums were about to bleed. The Shun family has served the country for generations, but the royal family treated us like this. First, King Yi fought for the throne, and then the royal family abandoned us. Song Qingshu continued. Actually, I happened to pass by when the Shun family was exterminated. Unfortunately, I was one step too late and didn't manage to save the Shun family. Then, he recounted what he had seen and heard that night. Of course, he did not mention Huang Rong, who had accompanied him, who was so cruel and merciless to kill the entire Shen family. Shen Xiaolong's eyes were bloodshot. He hated himself for not being there at the time. Otherwise, he would have died together with a person. That person was wearing a mask, so I didn't know his identity. He was also after the deer-cutting knife. Song Qingshu recalled the situation and continued. Besides, he used the 99 pill and the scorching flame pill to stop me from chasing after him. These two poisons are from the Isle of Heroes, so that person should be from the Isle of Heroes. Ruan Xingzhu took the opportunity to add, according to reliable information, the mastermind behind the Isle of Heroes should be Jia Sherdao. Song Qingshu looked at her approvingly. She was such a considerate woman. In fact, he had told Shen Xiaolong all these secrets to make him hate the court and Jia Sherdao, while Shen Xiaolong was disappointed in the court and the royal family. Chapter 17-18. That's right. Ruan Xingzhu, who was standing next to Jia Sherdao, was also stirred up. She wanted to kill Jia Sherdao, especially when she thought of what happened to Han Xingzhou. The more they talked, the angrier they became. They almost cursed Jia Sherdao's ancestors. After a long time, Shun Xiaolong calmed down and realized he had lost his composure. He said awkwardly, "Where is my sister now?" Seeing his hopeful gaze, Song Qingshu replied, "Young Lady Shun is currently very safe. As for where she is now, it involves the safety of a series of people. Forgive me for not being able to tell General Shun for the time being, but I will definitely arrange for you to meet as soon as possible." Hearing his answer, Shun Xiaolong was a little disappointed, but he understood. He said, "Since Lord Shin said so, you must have your reasons. With Lord Shin's care, my sister will be safe. Then I can go to Lin and without worry." Song Qingshu frowned and asked, "What are you going to Lin and for, General Shun?" Shun Xiaolong replied, "The Shun family's blood feud must be avenged. I couldn't leave before, but now that I know King Yi and Jia Sherdao are behind all this, I have to seek justice." Wan Xingzhu hurried to dissuade him. Now that Jia Sherdao has killed Minister Han, he has power in the court. He has many masters under his command, let alone the unpredictable Shur Patian, General Shun. You can't even defeat Zhuo Linshan. Shin Xiaolong opened his mouth and finally said, "Sometimes, even if you know it's impossible, you have to do it." Although he was proud of his martial arts, he had seen Zhuo Linshan fight in the Battle of the King of Shu's mansion. Zhuo Linshan was a master of both fists and swords. He wasn't sure he could defeat him, especially that weird, icy, genuine qi. Ruan Xingzhu said coldly, "Now that the Shun family has been destroyed, you and your sister are the only ones left in the world. Miss Shun is destined to get married, so only you can continue the Shun family. If you die, won't the Shun family have no descendants?" This, Shin Xiaolong was so shocked that he broke out in a cold sweat. He was hurt by love in his early years and had never considered starting a family. Initially, he wanted to spend the rest of his life alone, but with the other party's reminder, he realized that the Shun family's lineage was about to end. Nguyen Xingzhu continued, "You know that you are courting death, but you still want to go. It is unfilial to end the Shun family's lineage. As the leader of Sichuan's military, it is unwise to give way to one person while holding the military power. Does General Shen want to do such an unfilial and unwise thing?" Shen Xiaolong furrowed his brows. "But now that things have come to this, what else can I do? Don't tell me you want me to mobilize my troops to the south and purge the Emperor's side? Let's not talk about whether or not I can fight my way to Jiangnan. Even if I really do attack, how many soldiers in Sichuan will listen to my command is also a problem. Besides, King Yi sent people to kill Bijuan, and the Emperor allowed Shui Yi to kill him. I really don't want to serve the Zhao family anymore." Thinking of the royal family's attitude, Shen Xiaolong hated Jia Sherdao even more. He was not a loyal official of the Orthodox Confucian school. Otherwise, he would not have rebelled and left the Shen family. Nguyen Xingzhu rolled her beautiful eyes and said with a smile, "Actually, there's a clear path." Seeing that she was hinting at Song Qingshu while she was talking, Shen Xiaolong was shocked. "Has Madame already?" "Yes," Nguyen Xingzhu replied. "After knowing that Minister Han was killed, I completely surrendered to Prince Song. The royal family of the Southern Song dynasty is weak. First, they were humiliated by Jinkong. Then they killed Yu Fei to make peace, and now they killed Minister Han. Although I am a woman, I still despise such a royal family and court. However, in today's world, the Mongols, the Qing dynasty, and the Jin dynasty are all foreign countries, so it is impossible to surrender to them. The Ming dynasty died early. Fortunately, Prince Song came out of nowhere and built a huge territory from scratch in just 2 or 3 years. He defeated the Qing dynasty and the Jin dynasty several times. Being flattered like this, Song Qingshu was a little embarrassed, but he secretly praised her. He knew that some things were not suitable for him to say directly, but it was much more useful to hear it from her. However, with her foreshadowing, Song Qingshu was able to come out and say, "General Shun, I also have irreconcilable conflicts with Jia Sherdao. If you don't mind, we can work together to fight against him, who has all the power in the government." Shun Xiaolong hesitated and said, "But I heard that you are engaged to the 2 princesses." Song Qingshu replied calmly, "In order to unify the world, I have engaged to many women, not to mention that the two princesses are the daughters of the former emperor. They have always been unhappy that the emperor did not save their father and brother. He understood what Nguyen Xingzhu meant. Other than Jia Sherdao, some of Shun Xiaolong's enemies were also the royal family, such as King Yi. They were worried that he would not let them take revenge because of the princesses. Hearing this, Shun Xiaolong no longer had any doubts. He directly bowed and said, "Greetings, my lord." Song Qingshu hurried to help him up and said, "General Shun, please get up." He couldn't help but be overjoyed. He came to Sichuan this time to untie the knot in Ying's heart and to prevent Sichuan from becoming a threat to the flank of the Jin kingdom. He didn't expect that after a series of events, Sichuan would be in his pocket. How could he not be overjoyed? Of course, he was sober enough to know that this kind of control was still very fragile. At present, he could only indirectly control Sichuan through Xin Xiaolong and Ruan Xingzhu. Moreover, the people and civilians of Sichuan were loyal to the imperial court of Lin. Once there was a sign of independence, this kind of control would be gone. He could only slowly influence them and spend a few years to slowly penetrate into every area of Sichuan. In this way, he could completely subdue Sichuan in the future when he raised his arm. After that, they often met to discuss some details of controlling Sichuan. Of course, everyone agreed that the relationship between the two sides should not be announced for the time being, so as not to cause a thunderous reaction from Lin. It should be known that since the establishment of the Song dynasty, they had followed the policy of guarding the inside while ignoring the outside. They tried to compromise with the external enemies as much as possible and used the most bloody suppression methods to threaten the rule of the imperial power, such as peasant uprisings and official rebellions. Now the time was not right. They could not shed all pretense of cordiality with Lin. To Song Qingshu's surprise, these days they actually found Lin Pingji, who had been missing for a long time. After some questioning, he learned that after Wu Shi betrayed him, he jumped out of the chaos and went to Mount Qingcheng to seek revenge on Yu Songhai. However, although his martial arts had greatly improved, the Qingcheng faction had too many people. Although he had seriously injured Yu Songhai, he was not able to take his life. Instead, he was seriously injured. Fortunately, the martial arts taught to him by Song Qingshu allowed him to escape. After that, he hid in the wilderness for more than a month to recuperate from his injuries. When he heard that so many things had happened in Chengdu, he entered the city to investigate. However, he was discovered by Ruan Xingzhu's spies and brought to Song Qingshu. It just so happened that Song Qingshu was short of manpower here, so he arranged for Lin Pingji to assist Shun Xiaolong and Ruan Xingzhu here. Lin Pingji did not disappoint and managed things well. "Are you really going to leave Miss Yu alone?" Song Qingshu couldn't help but ask one day. Lin Pingji's eyes moved, but he finally said lightly, "Ling Huchong is going to rescue her. It's okay." Song Qingshu knew that Lin Pingji's priority right now was revenge. Everything else could be put aside. The reason why he was doing his best to complete the task assigned to him was mostly because he had killed his way to Mount Qingcheng alone. He had seen the benefits of numbers and decided to make a name for himself in the officialdom here and use the power of the officialdom to eliminate Yu Songhai's minions. After hesitating again and again, Song Qingshu finally made up his mind. Originally, he didn't want to get involved in the enmity between Lin Pingji and Yu Songhai. He only wanted to provide some necessary help. But now, this hatred had turned Lin Pingji's heart into a demon. Worried that Lin Pingji would ruin the overall situation in Sichuan after he left, he brought Lin Pingji all the way to Mount Qingcheng one night and captured Yu Songhai, as well as the few disciples of Fu Wei escort agency who committed the crime, allowing Lin Pingji to avenge the extermination of Fu Wei escort agency. Although Qingcheng sect was a major sect in the martial world, it had declined by the time it reached Yu Songhai's lineage. It was far inferior to the equally famous Amei sect. Coupled with the recent chaos in Sichuan, the matter of Qingcheng sect could only be considered as a small wave. Moreover, Yu Songhai had always been a shameless person and had no friends in the martial world who would stand up for him. Therefore, this matter was quickly forgotten. After taking revenge, Lin Pingji knelt in front of Song Qing-shu with red eyes and kowtowed more than 10 times. No one could stop him. Finally, he swore to be loyal to Song Qing-shu for the rest of his life in order to repay his kindness. Seeing that the knot in his heart was finally untied, Song Qing-shu was naturally happy. At the same time, he also mentioned that he would find out the whereabouts of Yulingshan and help him save her if there was a chance. As if sensing that Song Qing-shu was about to leave, Ruan Xingzhu was busy reorganizing the Yang clan during the day and arranging people into the Sichuan officialdom. At night, whenever she was free, she would pester Song Qing-shu to carry out her big plan. Song Qing-shu naturally enjoyed her gentleness and amorous feelings. He also understood that he had a lot of things to do and couldn't stay here forever. Also, he was worried that Ruan Xingzhu's words to the Yang clan would be found out to be a lie, so he could only work harder. Finally, one day, Ruan Xingzhu blushed and told him that she didn't come this month. Song Qing-shu wasn't a native of this world who lacked physiological knowledge. He immediately understood what was going on. "You're really pregnant?" Song Qing-shu was a little dazed. "Yes." Ruan Xingzhu nodded inaudibly. She gently touched her belly, and her face was filled with happiness. "I can feel it." Song Qing-shu naturally knew that after pregnancy, it was impossible to feel any changes so quickly. However, a mother's nature had a magical sixth sense that could often sense whether she was pregnant or not. "I'm going to be a father." Song Qing-shu couldn't come back to his senses for a while. One must know that he had been in this world for so long and had many female confidants around him. Although it was partly because he had previously refined his energy into qi, the fact that there wasn't any movement in a woman's belly made him feel a little apprehensive. Could it be because of his transmigration that he had lost his fertility like Senior Xiang Xiaolong? Only now did he finally feel relieved. Then he smiled bitterly. He had so many wives and confidants, but he never expected that the first one to get pregnant would be Ruan Xingzhu, who was completely unrelated to him. If Jiruo and the others knew about this, even if he didn't die, he would at least lose a layer of skin. Actually, she might not be the first. The image of Huang Rong's belly bulging appeared in Song Qing-shu's mind. However, when he asked her about it, she denied it. Chapter 17-19. After learning that Ruan Xingzhu was pregnant, Song Qing-shu changed his mind and stayed with her for a while. Although Ruan Xingzhu didn't say anything, she was very touched. After all, pregnant women were much more emotional than before. After spending so much time with him, Ruan Xingzhu had an illusion that she was really living happily with her husband. This feeling of home was something she had never experienced in the past few years. Sometimes in the dead of night, she even thought of using some means to keep this man by her side forever. Of course, such thoughts only flashed in her mind for a moment. She was no longer a naive little girl. She was a mature woman who could distinguish the pros and cons and feelings. She knew that the two of them were destined to have no ending, but she soon figured it out. Since there was no ending, she should enjoy the process and cherish every day with him. A few days later, news suddenly came. The Western Xia had made an agreement with the Southern Song to attack the Jin Kingdom together. Now that the Southern Song had lost the war and was suing for peace, they also sent envoys to express goodwill to the Jin Kingdom. However, they didn't want to waste their military supplies, so they planned to attack Liao instead. Yelu Yisin had been killed in Liao, and the Western Xia Crown Prince was engaged to Yelu Yisin's daughter, Commandery Princess Chen. They used this as an excuse to say that Yelu Yisin was killed by a villain and was wronged. Therefore, they planned to attack Liao in the name of eliminating the emperor. Knowing that Liao was in danger, Song Qing-shu was worried that Su Quan and Zhao Min couldn't handle it. He said goodbye to Ruan Xingzhu in a hurry and left for Liao after telling Xin Xiaolong and Lin Pingji what to do. Because he was worried that once the war started, it would be difficult to stop, Song Qing-shu was racing against time. He didn't even have time to see Tajkis and Goodbye when he passed by the Jin Kingdom. He just sent a message to them and asked them to bury Han Xingzhou. After all, the two of them used to be friends in a sense. Now that Han Xingzhou had ended up like this, he was also very sad. Of course, doing so would make more people disappointed in the Southern Song dynasty and deepen their dissatisfaction and anger toward Jia Sherdao. Even though he had traveled day and night, it wasn't easy to travel thousands of miles from Sichuan to Liao. Song Qingshu couldn't help but feel a little regretful. If he had known this would happen, he wouldn't have indulged in the land of gentleness. However, Wan Qingzhu had just gotten pregnant. It was only right for him to stay and take care of her for a few days. One day, when he entered Liao and was resting in a tea house by the roadside, he suddenly heard the surrounding tourists talking. "Did you hear?" The emperor announced to the world that Yelu Yisin was impersonated by Murong Jingwei, and that all the bad things he did these years were done by Murong Jingwei. The court restored Yelu Yisin's reputation. Is that true? Could it be that they were pressured by the Western Xia's invasion, so they used this to shut their mouths? It's not impossible. I feel that such a big event shouldn't be groundless. If it was fake, the court could have found another reason. Why do they have to explain it in such detail? Yeah, have you heard about what happened in Sichuan not long ago? Murong Fu used all kinds of tricks to get rid of his dissidents. He wanted to take all of Sichuan for himself and revive the Yin kingdom of hundreds of years ago. TSK. Murong Fu and Murong Jingwei are both from the Murong family. It seems that the Murong family really hid themselves well. I wonder if the Murong family has planted spies in other countries. Hearing these people's discussion, Song Qingshu thought of something. Now that the Murong family's intention of reviving their country was known by the world, the Murong family would probably have a hard time in the Southern Song dynasty. It was said that Murong Fu didn't even dare to return to Swallow Dock. Now, no one knew where he was hiding, as if he had suddenly disappeared from this world. By the way, I heard that after Yelu Yisin's reputation and title were restored, the members of his family were also restored. For example, Yelu Nanxian was reinstated as Princess Cheng, and she will be sent to Western Xia for a marriage alliance. Sai, the Liao is really not the same as before. Back then, other countries sent women to Great Liao for a marriage alliance. But now, Great Liao sent a princess to a mere Western Xia. It's really sad. A few elders of the kingdom of Liao were reminiscing about the glory of the past while sighing. Song Qingshu, on the other hand, was shocked. He had come a step too late. Was Yelu Nanxian going to marry into the Western Xia in the end? In fact, whether it was the restoration of Yelu Yisin's title or the marriage alliance with Western Xia, they were all part of the plan. But the plan was one thing, and hearing it happen was another. Thinking that he had promised to be the general who would escort her to her marriage, Song Qingshu finished his tea and immediately set off. He gave up riding a horse and directly switched to lightness skill. Although it was tiring, his speed was faster than a horse's. Finally, he arrived at the imperial palace that night. Seeing that he was so tired that he was out of breath, Zhao Min and Su Quan, who were playing chess in the harem, couldn't help but tease him. I told you that when he heard that Sister Nanxian was going to marry to Western Xia, he would desperately rush over, but you didn't believe me. Song Qingshu put his hand on a pillar and gasped for breath. "Bring me some water, I'm dying of thirst." Su Quan smiled sweetly and handed him a cup of tea. "Drink slowly. I've never seen you so exhausted since I met you. It seems that Sister Nanxian is really special in your heart. If you had rushed here from Chengdu day and night, you would also be exhausted." Song Qingshu rolled his eyes and drank the tea in one gulp. Finally, he calmed his breathing a little. "Actually, if something happened to you, I would also rush here at the risk of my life." Zhao Min also stood up at this time. Hearing this, she sighed and said, "You're really glib. I wonder how many girls you've said such words to." Song Qingshu smiled embarrassedly and hurriedly changed the topic. "By the way, did you encounter any problems in restoring Yelu Yisin's reputation? It should be known that Yelu Yisin had harmed many people over the years. It was not easy to wait for him to fall from power. If he told others that it was not Yelu Yisin who did it, many people would definitely be dissatisfied." Zhao Min replied, "If it were any other time, it would certainly not go smoothly. But the Western Xia army is pressing on the border. In order to avoid war, Most people naturally won't say anything. The few people who have objections are easy to deal with. And the Western Xia is really willing to withdraw their troops? Song Qingshu continued to ask. It's not that simple. Zhao Min shook her head. After some mediation, the Western Xia reluctantly agreed to temporarily stop advancing. Now that their troops are stationed on the border, we naturally won't wholeheartedly seek peace. We've already deployed our troops to the west. The Western Xia doesn't have the confidence to win when they see this situation, but it would be a bit embarrassing to sound the gong to withdraw. So, they decided to let Princess Chang'an marry over to them. It would also be a decent ending. When will the wedding procession set off? Song Qingshu asked with concern. After all, no matter how he looked at it, it was necessary for him to care about Yelu Nanxian. Chapter 17:20. Tomorrow. Song Qingshu was surprised. He didn't expect it to be in such a hurry. It can't be helped, Su Quan said. The two countries are confronting each other at the border. If we are not careful, there will be friction and war. Once the war starts, it will be a bloodbath. It won't be so easy to stop the war. So we have to send the bride over as soon as possible. Next to him, Zhao Min seemed to have guessed his thoughts. She giggled and said, Don't be reluctant. If a woman can bring peace, whether it's Emperor Wu of Han, Emperor Taizong of Tang, or even our great Khan, they would not hesitate to do so. On the contrary, only the Song dynasty was too prideful to marry. What's more, Zhao Min continued, you and I both know that this marriage is just a formality. Sister Nanxian won't suffer any loss with you as the general. Seeing her smiling face, Song Qingshu said grumpily, The crown prince of Xixia is not a eunuch. Why would he marry a wife? I heard that brother Ning, the crown prince of Xixia, is lustful. How can he be indifferent to Nanxian's beauty? Zhao Min giggled and said, Anyway, I only need to deal with Liao's crisis. As for Sister Nanxian's safety, we can only rely on the first young master of the Song family. These years, the first young master of the Song family has been famous all over the world. You have averted all kinds of dangerous situations. I think it will be easy this time. Moreover, you can go to Xixia and stir up a storm. It's killing two birds with one stone. Song Qingshu was speechless. He knew that she was gloating over his misfortune, and she might also be dissatisfied with him for flirting everywhere. So, he hurriedly changed the topic. How's the political situation in Xixia now? He paid attention to the situation in Jin, Qing, and Song dynasties. After all, Xixia was a little far from the Central Plains, so he didn't know much about it. At this time, Su Quan yawned and said, Take your time. I'm going to sleep. Hearing her words, Zhao Min, who is always generous, blushed and couldn't help but say, Why are you leaving at this time? Oh. Su Quan turned around and looked at her with a faint smile. Could it be that your highness wants me to stay and play the game of one dragon and two phoenixes? In the past, when Zhao Min and Zhou Zhuo were together, most of the time it was Zhao Min who flirted with the other, but in this aspect, how could she compare with Su Quan? She was greatly embarrassed by Su Quan's words. Hastily she spat, Pei, Shun Long Jiao is regarded as the evil path of the Wulin world. It is indeed not an injustice. Su Quan was very pleased to see her defeated look. She left a string of coquettish laughter and walked out. When she passed by Song Qingshu, she stopped and snorted in a low voice, Save it. Remember to look for me later in the night. She had always been a coquettish person, so she deliberately didn't hide the thoughts in her heart. After all, she was in the prime of her youth, and the two of them had been separated for so long. Moreover, her sweetheart was destined to be unable to stay here. Tomorrow, he would set off for Western Xia. It could be expected that she would have to spend a long period of time alone. Song Qingshu was wondering why she was so generous today. Hearing her words, he couldn't help but smile bitterly, thinking that he used to have all kinds of fantasies in the past. But in reality, there were so many women, and ordinary men couldn't take care of them all. If he hadn't practiced the Mary Zen, he was afraid that he would have been sucked into the dregs by now. After she left, Zhao Min came over, and her face was as bright as a blooming rose. This vixen really dares to say anything. Song Qingshu laughed and said, "What else can I do? Let you wait for the second half of the night." She guessed that you have always been proud and probably won't accept it, so she took the initiative to ask for the second half of the night. She really has the bearing of a wife. Zhao Min was so angry that she pinched him fiercely. "You wish. Who do you think we are?" Song Qingshu held her in his arms and hurriedly led the topic to the politics of Xixia, successfully diverting her attention. Since Li Yuanhao founded the country, Xixia has been standing firm in the west, and the domestic situation is also stable. Zhao Min nestled in his arms, and her fingers gently played with the small braid on her temples. Li Yuanhao led the Dangxiang people to establish his own country, and his prestige in the country is at its highest. But Xixia was founded by military force, and has been at war with Liao, Song, and Jin for decades. The royal family needs to rely on the support of many tribal chiefs, and Yili Yuanqi is one of them. Upon hearing Li Yuanhao's name, Song Qingshu couldn't help but sigh with emotion. The butterfly's wings were really big enough. Surprisingly, he was still the emperor of the Western Xia country in this chaotic world. According to history, Li Yuanhao should have turned into a pile of withered bones a decade ago after the Jinkong Rebellion. Yili Yuanqi? Another name also attracted Song Qingshu's attention. He vaguely remembered that he seemed to have heard of it somewhere. Zhao Min explained, "Yuhan people may not be familiar with the surnames of these grasslands. For example, Li Yuanhao was originally not surnamed Li, but Tuoba. Later, the Dangxiang people submitted to the dynasty of the Central Plains, so they changed their surname to Li. These years, the Dangxiang people also accepted the advanced culture of the Han people. Many people changed their names to Han surnames for convenience. The Yili family changed their surname to Mu, so they can also be called the Mu family." Surname Mu? A light flashed in Song Qingshu's mind. He suddenly remembered where he had heard this name. When he met Mu Wanqing some time ago, he seemed to have heard her mention it. She seemed to be in the Mu family of Xixia now. What a coincidence! Thinking of Mu Wanqing, Song Qingshu couldn't help but sigh with emotion. It should be known that she was one of the first women he met after he came to this world. In the end, because of a strange combination of factors, the two of them still didn't know each other. Zhao Min didn't notice his abnormality. She continued, "The Mu brothers and their entire family control almost 30% of the Xixia army, maybe even close to half of it." Song Qingshu frowned and said, "As the saying goes, how can others sleep soundly on the side of the bed?" Li Yuanhao is also a fierce and ambitious person of his generation. How can he tolerate such a situation where he can't get rid of his tail? "You only know one thing, but not the other," Zhao Min explained with a smile. "Because the Mu brothers' elder sister is Li Yuanhao's empress, and the current crown prince of Xixia, Brother Ning, is the Mu brothers' nephew. Crown Prince, Brother Ning." Thinking that Yelu Nanxian was going to marry him, Song Qingshu was quite displeased. Does he have any brothers or anything like that? The ambitious kind who share the same father but different mother? For Yelu Nanxian's sake, he naturally couldn't let this Brother Ning sit on the Crown Prince's throne peacefully. Zhao Min covered her mouth and smiled. "I know what you're thinking, but I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you. Brother Ning does have many brothers, but most of them are mediocre people. Only Prince Liliangzhua has some talent, but it is said that he has been seeking immortality and seeking the Tao these years. He even went to the Kongtong sect to cultivate for a period of time. Obviously, he has no interest in politics. That's troublesome." Hearing this situation, Song Qingshu couldn't help but feel annoyed. However, although he doesn't have any brothers who are fighting for the throne, he has an uncle who can't be underestimated. Zhao Min didn't keep him in suspense and said directly, "Prince Liang, Li Qianshan, is Li Yuanhao's youngest brother. He has always been doted on by Li Yuanhao." Song Qingshu frowned. No matter how much the younger brother is doted on, how can he be compared to the son? "That's not necessarily true," Zhao Min said with a smile. "In the prairie, there's always been a tradition of elder brothers passing each other. Moreover, when the Song dynasty was founded, Zhao Guangyi also inherited his brother Zhao Guangyin's empire. Moreover, Li Qinshuan's mother is a mysterious old concubine in the Xixiao imperial harem. It is said that she single-handedly established the elite hall. Therefore, whether it is political capital or military strength, Li Qinshan cannot be underestimated. Chapter 1721. The Mysterious Old Concubine. Song Qingshu naturally knew that the old concubine was the famous Li Qiushui. Her martial arts were unfathomable, and she often did not show her face, so it was only natural that she felt mysterious. Although the shadow of the old concubine is vaguely behind the Western Xia's Class 1 hall, on the surface, it is still General Helian Taishu who controls part of the military power, so he is also an important figure in Western Xia. Zhao Min continued to explain. Song Qingshu nodded. Having dealt with the Western Xia Class 1 hall so many times, Helian Taishu could be considered an old acquaintance. It seems that the Western Xia's political circle is the Crown Prince's Brother Ning group and the Liang Prince's Li Qinshan group. Zhao Min added, "There's also a family that you should also pay attention to. Speaking of this family, it should be very famous in your Han country." "What family?" Song Qingshu was stunned. Zhao Min smiled slightly. "The Qin family of Jiangning. That is Qin Hui's family. When Qin Hui fell, the Qin family was worried that the family would be liquidated, so they moved to Western Xia. As for why they chose Western Xia in the end, outsiders do not know. However, the Qin family can be considered to have some background. After arriving in Western Xia, they once again stepped onto the political stage by means of political marriage with the Mu family. The Qin family and the Mu family are connected by marriage." Hearing these keywords, Song Qingshu instantly thought of Qin Hongyan. According to Mu Wanqing, Qin Hongyan was pregnant before marriage. Due to the pressure from the family and the coercion of her brother, she had no choice but to marry a large family in Western Xia. Now that he thought about it, everything seemed to be right. After all, the Qin family is a traitor like Qin Hui. When you go to Western Xia, you should be careful not to be schemed against by them, Zhao Min reminded him. Song Qingshu nodded, but in his heart, he did not think much of it. Although he did not like the Qin family, with his relationship with Mu Wanqing, they should not be in a hostile relationship. By the way, there is one more thing I need to tell you. I have been staying here for so long, and I feel a bit bored. Moreover, I have been away for so long, and I feel a bit homesick. Some time ago, something happened. My father and big brother should be very worried about me." Zhao Min suddenly whispered. Song Qingshu immediately understood what he meant. "You want to go back to Mongolia?" "Yes, I want to go back and see my father." Zhao Min was usually in high spirits, but this time her tone was not confident. She looked at him nervously. Song Qingshu frowned inwardly. It was important to know that Liao's current situation was barely stabilized by Zhao Min and Su Quan. If she left, it would be difficult for Su Quan to play two roles. More importantly, she knew too many secrets now, and Mongolia was an enemy country. If she left, there was no guarantee that she would not divulge any secrets. Once she divulged even a little information, the plans that he had set up in Qin, Jin, and Liao countries over the years would be ruined. For others, Song Qingshu had enough control, such as the 3 corpse brain elixir, the life and death spell, or the common interests, and so on. But for Zhao Min, he had no means to control her. Did he not plant the life and death spell on her? He was suddenly shocked. What on earth am I thinking? When did I start to not believe in love? If even Zhao Min has to rely on these means to control me, I will really be alone. Is this what I want? Even if I get the country in the end, what is the point? After thinking it through, Song Qingshu said with a smile, "It's indeed hard for you to stay in the palace all day long. Besides, it's about time for you to go home. If it weren't for the fact that I have to go to the Western Xia soon, I would have gone back with you to visit my father-in-law and brother-in-law." "What father-in-law and brother-in-law? It's so unpleasant. If my father and brother know what you have done to me, they will draw their machetes and kill you immediately." Zhao Min raised her chin and snorted. Looking at her tender and alluring red lips, Song Qing-shu could not help but lower his head and kiss her. The rice has already been cooked. Are they going to go back on their word? If they dare to disagree, I will directly break into the Ryong Palace and elope with you. Who wants to elope with you? Zhao Min spat. Suddenly, her expression changed, and she reacted. So, you agree to let me go back to Mongolia? Song Qing-shu pinched her cheeks. Zhao Min's skin was very delicate and smooth. Coupled with the little baby fat on her oval face, it was quite comfortable to pinch her cheeks. Mongolia is your home. How can I disagree? Usually, when her cheeks were pinched like this, Zhao Min would subconsciously fight back and play with him. But today, she seemed to have forgotten about it. She just looked at her lover in a daze. Aren't you afraid that I will sell you out? Song Qing-shu said frankly. At first, I was a little worried. But then I thought that if I can't even trust you, who else can I trust in this world? Are you gambling? Zhao Min sighed faintly. Song Qing-shu shook his head and looked at her with a smile. This is not a gamble, because I am sure that I will win. Zhao Min's expression was very solemn. I suddenly regret my decision, because you are too soft-hearted and trust others too easily. You are not qualified to be a leader. With such a personality, I am afraid it will be difficult for you to unify the world in the future. Song Qing-shu suddenly became depressed. Am I that bad? At this time, Zhao Min changed the topic. But although your personality is not qualified to be a leader, you are a perfect lover. She had been wearing a straight face before. At this time, she suddenly smiled. It was like the first melting of ice and snow, or like the spring breeze that came at night and thousands of pear trees bloomed. Seeing her beautiful smile, Song Qing-shu could not help but be stunned for a moment. Idiot! Zhao Min tapped his forehead. She was born beautiful, and after smiling, she looked even more charming under the red candlelight. Song Qing-shu was tempted. He carried her in his arms and walked into the room. Zhao Min was so shy that she exclaimed, "What do you want to do?" "Want to?" Song Qing-shu nodded seriously. "You're so annoying." Zhao Min was so angry that she bit his shoulder. Song Qing-shu gasped, "Are you born in the year of the dog? Who asked you to be so bad?" Zhao Min's whole body shrank in his arms. Her smooth white skin exuded a delicate red, like a white jade smeared with a layer of rouge. Song Qing-shu knew that she was usually radiant and generous, but after all, she had not been in bed for long. She was still far from the age of greed. Now, it was inevitable that there was still some shyness left in her. But the more he knew, the more excited he was. "You're going back to Mongolia soon. I don't know how long it will be before we meet again. Of course, we have to hurry." Thinking of the upcoming separation, Zhao Min for a moment also felt endless sorrow. She gently nodded and no longer opposed. Because of the impending separation, and because he wanted to give her an unforgettable night, so that she would never forget him when she was alone in the future, Song Qing-shu worked very hard tonight. Chapter 17:22. When Song Qing-shu arrived at Su Quan's bedroom, he faced her playful gaze and said, "Why don't you stay with the princess for a while longer?" Although Song Qing-shu was thick-skinned, he couldn't help blushing and said, "Well, I haven't seen you for a long time. I'm leaving tomorrow, and I have a lot of things to say to you." Su Quan looked at him with a faint smile and said, "Aren't you tired of saying the same things twice in one night?" Song Qing-shu held his breath and was about to explain, but Su Quan waved her hand lazily and said, "You don't need to explain. Come to bed and sleep." Su Quan lifted a corner of the quilt and revealed her extremely charming body. Song Qing-shu didn't stand on ceremony. He quickly took off his clothes and touched the bed. Although there were 2 layers of clothes between them, he could still feel the warmth and amazing elasticity of her body. Although he had just come from Zhao Min's place, the 2 different styles still made him hungry. With a soft sound, Su Quan opened his onlu paw and said, "Don't play around. Have a good rest." "I'm not tired. It's not like you don't know that my body is made of iron," Song Qing-shu said with a smile. Su Quan rolled her eyes and said, "You rushed back day and night, and just spent most of the night in Zhao Min's place. Even if you're made of iron, you're almost melted, right? Don't play around. Just talk. Anyway, I'm not leaving. There's still a long way to go. Song Qing-shu was surprised, and then a trace of warmth surged in his heart and said, "Are you feeling sorry for me?" Su Quan touched his face with her slender hand and said, "You're my man. If I don't feel sorry for you, who will?" Quan-er. Song Qing-shu held her hand tightly and looked at her, touched. "Don't be so nauseating." Su Quan snorted and found a more comfortable position to curl up in his arms. "Don't play around. Talk to me properly. I'm always separated from you more than I am together. It's rare to have such a chance to chat with you." Song Qing-shu's heart was also filled with tenderness, so he hugged her and began to talk about their respective circumstances after they separated. During this period, there was only the warmth of helping each other, not the slightest bit of lust. The two of them chatted like this, and before they knew it, it was already dawn. Su Quan showed a hint of apology. "It's all my fault. You didn't get any rest last night." Song Qing-shu shook his head. Then, he said with a smile, "Anyway, the road to the Western Xia is still long. There are plenty of things to do and sleep. On the contrary, I didn't have many opportunities to chat with you like last night." Su Quan pursed her lips into a smile and said, "Then, I look forward to seeing you finish your business in Xixia and come back as soon as possible." Song Qing-shu leaned over and kissed her on the cheek. "Don't make me sleep like a vegetarian when the time comes." Suju. Su Quan was stunned. She quickly reacted and could not help but giggle. "Don't worry. I won't be willing to sleep with you even if you want to." Noticing the charming look on her face, Song Qing-shu couldn't help but sigh with emotion. "I suddenly don't want to leave when I see you like this. Don't be so talkative. If you still don't show up, I'm worried that Commandery Princess Chang'an won't be able to hold on." Su Quan covered her mouth and giggled. However, there was some uncontrollable joy and complacency between her eyebrows. After all, which woman didn't want to be praised by another woman? Song Qing-shu and Su Quan spent a long time together. Then, he left her bedchamber. Originally, he wanted to bid farewell to Zhao Min. After all, he was about to go to the Western Xia, and she had to return to Mongolia. He didn't know when they would meet again, but when he arrived at Zhao Min's bedchamber, he found that the beauty was still sleeping soundly. A large part of her soft, snow-white waist was exposed outside the quilt. Her smooth, white, and tender thighs were unconsciously clamped on the quilt. She was different from her usual glamorous and alluring self. At this time, she was sleeping soundly with a bit of a young girl's tenderness. Song Qing-shu knew that she still hadn't woken up because she was too tired last night. He couldn't help but feel pity for her. He gently covered her with the quilt again to prevent her from catching a cold. He sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the sleeping girl for a while. In the end, he didn't wake her up. After all, he'd said everything he needed to say last night. Waking up now would only add to the sadness of parting. At this time, the bridal procession on the outskirts of the city was still stationed there. As the host, Yilu Nancian suddenly felt a little irritated. She was already irritated because she was about to marry into the Western Xia. Staying here for so long made her feel even more irritated. "What's going on? How much longer do we have to wait?" Yilu Nancian asked with a dark face. Although it wasn't the first time they met, looking at the exquisite face in front of him, the official from the Ministry of Rites was still stunned. But at this time, he had no time to appreciate the beauty in front of him. Wiping away the cold sweat on his forehead, he hurriedly replied, "There's a message from the palace. They want us to wait for the newly appointed marriage general." Hearing the words, marriage general, Yilu Nancian fell into a trance. She couldn't help but remember the promise someone had made to her. Unfortunately, recently, she had been sending people to inquire about this person. Unfortunately, that person hadn't returned to Shangjing City. All of her expectations were immediately replaced by resentment and anger. This is really outrageous. How can they let a princess wait here for the marriage general? The dowry maid noticed the expression on her Miss face and cried out for her master. It is indeed a bit inappropriate, but this is the decree from the palace. Princess, please don't be impatient. The official from the Ministry of Rites was cursing the people in the palace for causing trouble. letting a princess who was supposed to be in a marriage alliance wait for a marriage general. What a scandal. After a while, Yelu Nancian finally couldn't restrain herself anymore. She coldly said, "Pass down my order, the entire army is to move out." The official from the Ministry of Rights hesitated, but not to mention that the other party is a lowly general. Even if he was a famous general, this princess is now related to the safety of Liao and Xia. If we delay the time and the two countries go to war, can you bear the consequences? She wasn't wrong. Although he was called the marriage general in name, everyone knew that this general wasn't part of the list of officials. It was just a temporary title. That official from the Ministry of Rights immediately lowered his stance. "If there's any blame from the palace, I will take responsibility. Let's move out." Yelu Nancian let down the curtain, not giving the other party any room to bargain. Helpless, the official could only bitterly smile and order the entire army to move out. A while after the wedding procession set out, the sound of galloping horses came from afar. The official from the Ministry of Rights ran over. "Princess, the marriage general is here. He wants to see you." Yelu Nancian was already angry from waiting for so long. She didn't have a good impression of this so-called marriage general. Hearing his words, she calmly replied, "I won't see him." Song Qing-shu hurried over, wishing he could immediately run to Yelu Nancian's carriage to see her, but he still had some sense left in him. He knew the consequences of doing so in front of so many people, so he could only obediently ask the official from the Ministry of Rights to pass on the message. The official from the Ministry of Rights originally felt that it was somewhat inappropriate to let other men see the bride, but then he thought about it. The other was the dowry general. He would have to deal with the princess later, so he passed on the message for him. Chapter 17:23. Song Qing-shu was taken aback, not expecting such an answer. He couldn't stop thinking, does she not know my identity, or is she purposely throwing a tantrum? But no matter what, now that he had been clearly rejected, it was not convenient to go find Yelu Nancian in front of everyone. He could only ride his horse listlessly in front, thinking that he had to find a chance to teach her a lesson. Unfortunately, in the next few days, Yelu Nancian remained in seclusion, not giving him a chance to get close to her. As time went by, Song Qing-shu became more and more convinced that she was doing this on purpose. The speed of the bridal procession wasn't fast. After a few days, they had only traveled about 100 li. The sky was getting dark, and looking at the relay station in the distance, Song Qing-shu was thinking that he had to go see Yelu Nancian today, even if he had to break into her room at night. Because the sky was getting dark, the bridal procession decided to rest at the relay station. Yelu Nancian still didn't get out of the carriage. She had someone drive the carriage to the backyard and forbade anyone from going near. As if noticing Song Qing-shu's awkwardness, the official from the Ministry of Rights came over and said, "General, please don't be offended. The princess is most likely not in a good mood." He was actually very curious about this escort general. He hadn't seen him in Shanjing before. It was as if he had been sent here out of nowhere. Everyone was trying to guess his background and what he had done to deserve such a direct appointment from a noble in the palace. After these few days of interaction, Song Qing-shu knew that this official's name was Xiao Huan Duo. The name was a bit hard to pronounce, but he was used to it. This was the name of people like Liao. Official Xiao must be joking. How could I dare to blame the princess? Song Qing-shu had disguised his appearance, so he didn't have to worry about his real identity being discovered. When he entered the relay station, Song Qing-shu's heart suddenly stirred. He turned his head and looked to the side. He saw a petite little girl, about 8 or 9 years old. She had a tender and beautiful face, and her eyes were watery. "She's really a beauty." Song Qing-shu could not help but be amazed. It must be known that this world was different from the future. Most of the common people were somewhat malnourished. Moreover, it was common for them to marry and have children at an early age. Therefore, children were generally thin and small. It was rare to see a little girl with such delicate makeup. Song Qing-shu carefully thought about all the little girls he had seen in the past. It seemed that only Miao Rulin was comparable to this little girl. However, Miao Rulin had that kind of pure and innocent beauty. This girl was obviously so young, but but she looked somewhat beautiful like a young lady. It was really hard to describe. I didn't expect that there would be such a stunning beauty in a mountain village. Xiao Huandu also noticed the little girl and couldn't help but sigh. Hearing the frivolous and lewd tone in his voice, Song Qing-shu was speechless. He thought that the people of this era were really unscrupulous. They could even have evil thoughts about such a little girl. However, when he thought about how many women in this world were married and had children at the age of 13 or 14, he was used to it. Looking at her, she should be the daughter of the leader of this relay station. Why don't I go and ask him to let her serve the general at night? The general can take her back to be a concubine. Their family can be considered to have made a meteoric rise. Xiao Huandu moved closer to him and deliberately lowered his voice. He had the intention of winning over this mysterious general, so he planned to present the Buddha with borrowed flowers. After all, it wasn't his own daughter, so he didn't feel bad. In the distance, the little girl was originally sweeping the ground with her head lowered. Suddenly, a cold light flashed in her eyes. Unfortunately, the angle was not right, so Song Qing-shu and Xiao Huandu did not notice. There's no need. At this time, Song Qing-shu was speechless at Xiao Huandu-ho's suggestion. It should be known that Song Qing-shu, who came from the future world, was really not used to some of the things in this world that he was used to. Worried that Xiao Huandu would make a move on the little girl himself, Song Qing-shu added, "Right now, we have important matters to attend to, so it's best not to complicate matters. Moreover, the princess has not been in a good mood for the past 2 days. If she finds out and blames us, we will not be able to bear the consequences." Thinking of Yelu Nanqian's current state, Xiao Huandu shivered. He hurriedly said, "Thank you for the reminder. Let's go. I'll treat the general to a drink." After drinking with Xiao Huandu, it was already late at night. Song Qing-shu pretended to be drunk and returned to his room. After waiting for a while, he guessed that most people were asleep, so he quietly snuck into the back courtyard. Yelu Nanqian was acting like she didn't want anyone to enter, so he could only resort to this method. However, he knew that his martial arts were high, so he didn't have to worry about being discovered by the guards. Along the way to the back courtyard, he couldn't help but frown. It was too quiet here. He looked around but couldn't see any guards. At first, he thought there were hidden sentries, but after a careful inspection, he still couldn't find anything. At this time, sound of fighting came from Yelu Nanqian's room. Song Qing-shu's heart skipped a beat. Oh no! He hurriedly ran in that direction, but before he arrived, he saw Yelu Nanqian from afar, holding a long sword in her hand. Her entire body was like a fairy, and several people were attacking her from all sides. Song Qing-shu's eyes were sharp. He recognized one of them to be the leader of this relay station. He instantly understood what was going on. Most likely, there were assassins who had arrived first and killed the real relay station guards, then disguised themselves as them. As for the guards of the bridal procession, there was no movement. It was most likely that they had been drugged with something like a knockout drug. Before this, their food and drinks had all been monitored by specialized personnel. If they had used a poison that could seal the throat upon contact, they would definitely not be able to hide it from them. Presumably, they had used something like a knockout drug that was not lethal, but had a miraculous effect. Noticing that Yelu Nanqian wasn't at a disadvantage when fighting against the assassins, Song Qing-shu didn't immediately appear to help. He decided to observe the origins of these assassins' martial arts first. The long sword in Yelu Nanqian's hand glowed like a cold moon, her entire person advancing and retreating with ease, like a fairy. Those people couldn't even get close to her. Watching this, Song Qing-shu nodded inwardly. Her sun and moon divine sword technique is becoming more and more refined. Among the younger generation, she could be considered an outstanding talent. He didn't even realize that his tone of voice was that of a senior, completely forgetting that he was also a young man. Seeing that they couldn't take down Yelu Nanqian after attacking for a long time, the assassins looked at each other and nodded. Then, without prior agreement, they threw away their swords and used their fists instead, attacking Yelu Nanqian. Fists of 7 damages. Song Qing-shu recognized that fist technique and couldn't help but be shocked. Ever since Golden Mane Lion King Siesun wreaked havoc in the Kong Tong sect, the Kong Tong sect had kept a very low profile, rarely appearing in the martial world. Many people had even forgotten that there was such a big sect in the martial world. The Fists of Seven Damages was famous for hurting oneself before hurting others. Training 1 to 7 wounds, all 7 would be injured. With such a huge sacrifice, the power was naturally not to be underestimated. As soon as the assassins used the Fists of Seven Damages, Yelu Nancian felt a little uneasy. She had no choice but to rush into the courtyard, using her lightness kung fu to deal with them. Her slender legs were a feast for Song Qingshu's eyes. Chapter 17:24. Both sides fought for a while longer. The assassins gradually gained the upper hand. Suddenly, Yelu Nancian let out a shrill cry, finding an opportunity to leap into the air. The assassins subconsciously looked up, but all they could see was a vast expanse of white, forcing them to close their eyes. They were all highly skilled martial artists and immediately realized something was wrong. Just as they were about to open their eyes again, they didn't have the chance to do so. Feeling a cold sensation in their throats, they hurriedly covered their necks with their hands, but no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't stop the blood from gushing out. Gurgling sounds could be heard from their mouths, but none of them could say another word. Song Qingshu nodded in agreement. Yelu Nancian's swordplay was called the Sun-Moon Celestial Sword Skill because it fully utilized the power of sunlight and moonlight. When attacking, it could interfere with the opponent's vision. If it was a cloudy day, her swordplay's power would be greatly reduced. These assassins were very unlucky. Although it was a sneak attack at night, tonight was a full moon and there wasn't a single cloud in the sky. This was why Yelu Nancian purposely moved the battle to the yard. In fact, she could have used the light from the candles inside the house as well, but because of the battle just now, many of the candles were extinguished and she couldn't light them again, so she could only come out and borrow the moonlight. Yelu Nancian used her sword to support herself, her chest rising and falling rapidly. It was obvious that using that move just now had taken a lot out of her. She had no choice but to stop and calm herself down. Little girl's swordplay is not bad. Using the moonlight to confuse people, truly amazing. Suddenly, an old and dignified voice rang out. "Who is it?" Yelu Nancian's heart skipped a beat. She quickly held her sword in front of her and looked around cautiously, but she didn't see anything. Not to mention her. Even Song Qingshu was extremely shocked. The other party had gotten so close to them, yet they had not been discovered. It could be imagined how high their martial arts were. What made him even more bewildered was that, even now, he did not know where the other party was. Could it be that their martial arts are a level higher than mine? This thought popped up in Song Qingshu's mind, but he quickly shook his head. He believed that there were many hidden masters in this world, but to say that they were a level higher than him, it was impossible. However, he continued to use his aura to scan the surrounding area of several dozen feet. Apart from the little girl with rosy lips and white teeth that he had seen in the inn, there was no one else. Why is this little girl here? Her parents are really generous. I must pay attention to protect her later so that she doesn't get caught in the crossfire. Coming from the future, he had the idea of respecting the old and loving the young. What is the name of this sword technique? The old voice sounded again. This time, Song Qingshu was really shocked because he realized that the voice came from the mouth of the little girl. He didn't pay attention to it before, and the voice sounded old and dignified, so he subconsciously excluded the little girl. But now that he was 120% focused, he naturally noticed something strange. Am I dreaming? Song Qingshu couldn't help rubbing his eyes. At this time, that little girl had already entered the yard. Yelu Nancian also saw her, but she didn't think too much of it. Instead, she reminded the little girl, "Little girl, it's dangerous here. Leave quickly." Song Qingshu didn't know if he should be angry or amused at the same time. This little girl was in danger, and yet she was warning others. But it was enough to show how pure and kind she was. "What little girl? I'm your grandma." The little girl coldly snorted, her voice full of dissatisfaction. Eh. Yalu Nanshian's expression froze, looking at her as if she had seen a ghost. Grandma. Song Qingshu's heart skipped a beat. This little girl with the body of a little girl and calling herself Grandma. Could it be that Misty Peak's Spirit Vulture Palace's Heaven Mountain old lady? But what did Yalu Nanxian do to provoke her to personally come down the mountain? Are you a human or a ghost? Yalu Nanxian's hair stood on end. She had heard stories of old monsters possessing people. This little girl in front of her looked so young, yet her voice was so old. Her eyes were like lightning, bright and full of expression. When she looked at Yalu Nanxian, she exuded a domineering aura. No matter how she looked at her, she looked like a ghost from the legends. The little girl said, "You don't even salute when you see your elders. So unruly. If it was any other time, I would have killed you with one palm. But seeing that little girl was worried about my safety, I'll spare your life for now." Her voice was old, her expression even older. Thinking about how she had just called this little girl, now hearing her calling her little girl again, Yalu Nanxian felt it was absurd. The little girl didn't answer. She continued, "Originally, I came here on a mission to take your life, but when I saw you, I felt that your swordsmanship is unique, you're beautiful, and most importantly, you have a kind heart, so I changed my mind. Of course, it's impossible for you to continue your marriage. Come back with me and be my maid." Song Qingshu's heart skipped a beat. Listening to her words, it seemed like someone had asked her to kill Yalu Nanxian. But who in this world could ask the great Heaven Mountain old lady to help? It seemed like the main purpose was to destroy the marriage alliance between the two countries. Was it the Southern Song dynasty or the Mongols? "Why does your voice sound so old? Who are you?" Seeing the little girl slowly walking towards her, Yalu Nanxian felt a chill, goosebumps rising all over her body. She knew this was a sign of impending danger. "This is the Misty Peak's Spirit Vulture Palace's Palace Lord, Heaven Mountain old lady. Of course, she has the body of a little girl, but her voice is old." Heaven Mountain old lady's martial arts were too high. Song Qingshu was worried that Yalu Nanxian would be in danger, so he came out from the shadows. I misjudged you. I didn't think that Liao's marriage escort general would be such a skilled martial artist." Heaven Mountain old lady was even more surprised than Song Qingshu when she saw him suddenly appear. She didn't even notice that there was a third person in the crowd. When Yalu Nanxian saw the clothes he was wearing, she immediately understood that he was the marriage general who had made her wait for so long. Originally, she had been dissatisfied with him, which was why she had rejected his request to see her several times in the past few days. But now, in this strange situation, seeing him come out, she felt a sense of security in her heart. "How could I not have misjudged you? I thought you were just a child in the mountains, but I didn't expect you to be a peerless expert." Song Qingshu had changed her appearance, so the two of them were naturally unable to recognize her. Heaven Mountain old lady gave a humph. "On account of the kindness you've shown with your mouth today, I'll spare your life today." She had dominated the world for decades. Her tone was naturally filled with disdain. Although she was startled that she didn't notice his presence, she didn't think he was a match for her. Chapter 1725. Liao's enemy. The Liao's enemy. The Liao's enemy. The Liao's was equivalent to the Ministry of Rites of the Han Dynasty. For this marriage alliance, many of the complicated rituals needed to be handled by him and the Western Xia. From the very beginning, Song Qingshu had the idea of leaving all the work to him. If he were to die, Song Qingshu would have a lot of troubles in the future. What's more, the two of them were drinking and chatting together just now. It could be said that they had a little bit of friendship. Heavenly Mountain Tonglao frowned. "Who is Xiaohuan Duo?" Song Qingshu smiled awkwardly. "The one who talked to me during the day. So, what's that shameless person?" Sky Mountain Girl snorted coldly. "I haven't had the time to deal with him yet. When this is over, I'll go and take his life later." Song Qingshu secretly heaved a sigh of relief. It was good that he was alive. If he wanted to be a hands-off shopkeeper, he would have to rely on him. Yalu Nanxian walked up to him, coldly saying, "You still have time to worry about others? This person in front of us is a powerful master. I'm afraid we won't be able to survive today." She could be considered as half a member of the Jianghu, so naturally, she had heard many legends about Tianshan Tonglao. She knew that Tianshan Tonglao was the lord of the Misty Peaks Vulture Palace. She controlled the masters of the 36 islands and 72 caves. She never used a second move to kill someone. She was not confident that she could defeat such a horrifying elder of the Jianghu. Song Qing-shu smiled in an unconcerned manner and said, "Princess, you can rest assured. Didn't old lady Tong say that she won't take your life? At worst, you can just become her maid. Rumor has it that her maids are more like her disciples. To be able to receive guidance from such an expert, becoming a maid is not a loss." Yalu Nancian didn't expect him to be so careless. She couldn't help but get angry. "Then aren't you afraid?" "Of course I'm not afraid. Just now old lady Tong said she would spare my life." Song Qing-shu's grinning face almost angered Yalu Nancian to death. "Humph, what a glib tongue. It seems like you're the same type of person as that Xiao Huan do." "I've changed my mind." Tianshan Tong Granny snorted coldly. Song Qing-shu couldn't help but smile when he saw that she was clearly a little girl with rosy lips and white teeth, yet she spoke in an old-fashioned manner. "Are you laughing at me?" Heavenly Mountain Tonglao was very sensitive. She immediately noticed the change in his expression. Song Qing-shu tried to hold back his laughter. "It's nothing. I just think that Elder Tong looks a little cute." "What does kawaii mean?" Heavenly Mountain Tonglao was confused. "You can interpret it as cute," Song Qing-shu answered subconsciously. "Courting death." Heaven Mountain Tonglao frowned. The temperature in the yard dropped by several degrees. Yalu Nancian couldn't help but shiver from the cold, her heart filled with fear. Killing intent could actually materialize, but what made her despair even more was that her limbs felt like they were frozen in place, unable to move at all. No wonder it's rumored that Heavenly Mountain Tonglao doesn't need to use a second move to kill. She couldn't help but look at the general next to her. Although he was annoying, he was still her companion. She didn't want to see his blood splattered all over the place. As expected, he finally managed to block Heavenly Mountain Tonglao's palm with great difficulty. But in the next moment, as if he was struck by lightning, he fell heavily to the ground like a broken sandbag. "You survived my Heavenly Mountain 6 solar palms." Surprise flashed in Heavenly Mountain Tonglao's eyes. Elder Tong's martial arts are as good as the rumors say. Song Qing-shu forced out a mouthful of blood, smiling bitterly. "Looks like I'm dead for sure. I wonder if Elder Tong can show mercy and tell me who hired you to kill us, so I can die knowing the truth. Since you're going to die, why bother?" Heavenly Mountain Tonglao flicked her sleeve, too lazy to answer his question. She reached out to grab Yalu Nancian. "Little girl, come with me." But her grab missed. This was no small matter. She had just seen Yalu Nancian attack, so she used her aura to lock on her. Logically speaking, she shouldn't have been able to dodge, but why? But she immediately understood the reason. Looking at Song Qing-shu, who was holding Yalu Nancian, a strange light flashed in her eyes. "Today, I've misjudged you 3 or 4 times. Song Qing-shu smiled faintly. "I can only say that Elder Tong has a sharp tongue, but a soft heart. Just now I showed mercy." This was his evaluation from the bottom of his heart. In the original novel, Heavenly Mountain Tonglao was fierce on the surface, but in reality, she had a pure heart. On the other hand, Li Qiushui was gentle on the surface, but had a heart of a snake and scorpion. Just now, he pretended to be heavily injured, wanted to find out who the mastermind was. But Heavenly Mountain Tonglao was very tight-lipped, so he could only give up. When Yalu Nancian saw Tonglao grabbing her, she had already closed her eyes in resignation, but she quickly realized that she wasn't grabbed by Tonglao. Instead, she was being pulled back by someone else. Curious, she opened her eyes and saw that it was that annoying marriage general. "Who the hell are you?" Heavenly Mountain Tonglao looked at him deeply. His repeated failures made her realize that this wasn't a coincidence. How could a mere marriage general have this kind of ability? "I'm Great Liao's marriage general, Xiao Beishin," Song Qing-shu said with a straight face. "Xiao Beishin?" Heavenly Mountain Tonglao frowned. I've only heard of two peerless experts in Liao. One is called Xiao Yuan Shan, the other is Xiao Feng. Xiao Beishan. I've never heard of him. Yilu Nanxian was also confused. She had been in Liao for so many years, but had never heard of this person's name. But she quickly realized that the Yilu and Xiao surnames in Liao had always intermarried. She was called Nanxian, but he called himself Beishan. Wasn't this taking advantage of her? Thinking of this, she couldn't help but glare at this person. Only then did she realize that she was in his arms. She couldn't help but feel embarrassed. At this time, she had already broken free from heavenly mountain Tonglau's control. She swung the sun-moon holy sex sword and stabbed at the man next to her. Song Qingshu jumped in fright and quickly dodged to the side. Are you crazy? Yilu Nanxian blushed. Who told you to touch me? Song Qingshu was very depressed. I'm saving you, okay? Compared to being touched by you, I'd rather be her maid. Yilu Nanxian stood with her sword in front of her, looking very graceful under the moonlight. Song Qingshu knew it was because of his disguise that he didn't recognize him. He couldn't get angry with her, so he said, Fine, fine, fine. You're pretty, you're right. Heavenly Mountain Tonglao watched the two of them play and couldn't help but sigh. It's good to be young. Song Qingshu rolled his eyes at her. You're still too young to be my little sister. Don't be so old, okay? He couldn't help but think of some monsters on the internet in his previous life. They seemed to have some strange ideas about Heavenly Mountain Tonglao, saying that they could experience the game of raising a legal lowly. Chapter 17:26. Sensing the meaning in his eyes, Heaven Mountain Tonglao was enraged. Brat, you're looking for death. Her body flashed, and her palm came crashing down on his head. She didn't hold back at all. She was clearly angry. Song Qingshu felt a gust of wind on his face. He didn't dare to be careless. He quickly used his internal energy to counter her palm. With a loud boom, Song Qingshu's body swayed, while Tian Shan, Tonglao flipped over and flew backward. One of them was standing on the ground with the advantage of the earth. The other was standing on the ground with the advantage of being in the air. They were evenly matched. I've long heard that the Heaven Mountain Six Solar Palm has a move called Yang Gu Tian Jun. When used in a rage, it can unleash a powerful attack. Seeing it today, it truly lives up to its name. Song Qingshu couldn't help but praise. Which old monster are you? Tianshan Tonglao looked at him suspiciously. Song Qingshu held his breath. He said gloomily, I don't dare to call myself old in front of Elder Tonglao. Yilu Nanxian was already in a bad mood recently, and today she encountered something like this. Her face was as cold as ice. But when she heard his words, she remembered that she also suspected Heaven Mountain Tonglao to be an old monster. She didn't expect the tables to turn, and now it was her who said she suspected someone else was an old monster. She couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of the reversal. Heaven Mountain Tonglao looked at him carefully, shaking her head. Our Xiao Yao sect has always been mysterious. The world doesn't know much about us, not to mention our martial arts. And you're so young, yet you're able to fight evenly with me. If you're not the reincarnation of an old monster, then what are you? Song Qingshu smiled and explained, I only found out about your sect by chance. As for martial arts, since when did the older you are, the more powerful you are? Heaven Mountain Tonglao snorted. Young man, you sure are arrogant. Let me see if you have what it takes. At first, she thought her opponent was a young martial artist and looked down on him, so she attacked carelessly. But now that she knew he wasn't simple, she didn't hold back. Yilu Nanxian felt her vision blur. Heaven Mountain Tonglao had already crossed a few feet and appeared in front of her. She was shocked, thinking that she had no chance against someone of this level. In the blink of an eye, the two of them had exchanged a few moves. Soon, the marriage escort general was pushed back a few steps. Yilu Nanxian sighed to herself. Although this Xiao Bei-shun's martial arts were high, there was still a big gap between him and the likes of Tianshan Tonglao, who had dominated the martial world for decades. Meanwhile, Song Qingshu retreated a few steps, a hint of astonishment flashing across his face. He can actually stack the power of 3 palms together. This is similar to Xiao Feng's 3-layer dragon subduing waves. It looks like the path of martial arts is the same. Xiao Feng's 18 dragon palms can reach this level. Hearing his words, Heaven Mountain Tong Lao could not help but be stunned. She had the reputation of North Chiao Peak and South Morong Peak. I haven't left the mountain for decades. I didn't expect the rising stars in the martial arts world to be so powerful. Song Qingshu nodded. Even though there are many differences, the principles are similar. If there's a chance, I'd like to see it. Heaven Mountain Tong Lao changed the topic, but I'll take care of you first. She attacked again. Song Qingshu's expression turned serious. His opponent's Heaven Mountain's 6 solar palms suddenly changed from its previous ferociousness. One hand was filled with pure yang energy, and the other was filled with pure yin energy. Most importantly, the yin and yang energy in both hands were interchanging, making it difficult to defend against. After a while, Heaven Mountain Tong Lao snorted, "If you don't use your real skills, don't regret it if you die in my hands." She sped up her attacks. Song Qingshu gave a wry smile. In order to hide his identity, he didn't want to show off his real skills. With his level of cultivation, he could handle most situations with just a few punches and kicks, but Heaven Mountain Tong Lao was no ordinary opponent. As they fought, he sensed danger and quickly used the dragon palms. His palms moved in and out, just in time to counter her Heaven Mountain's 6 solar palms. Oh, the dragon palms? Heaven Mountain Tong Lao's eyes were sharp. She quickly recognized his palms. "You said your surname was Xiao. Could it be that you are Xiao Feng?" On the side, Yalu Nancian was also looking at him in surprise, deep in thought. Song Qingshu replied, "If I was Xiao Feng, would I have boasted about myself like that?" "That's true," Heaven Mountain Tong Lao nodded, "but the beggar clan doesn't have a master who can use the dragon palms to this level. You can't be Guijing, right?" Song Qingshu laughed. "If only you were. I'd love to have a wife as beautiful as Huangrong." Shapeless waves. Heaven Mountain Tong Lao's face turned cold. Her attacks became even more violent. Song Qingshu was depressed, thinking that he was being treated unjustly. In his previous world, this was an ordinary way of speaking, but in this world where etiquette prevailed, it was a bit frivolous. He finally understood the feeling of, "It's not me that's wrong, it's the whole world." Heaven Mountain Tong Lao attacked fiercely, but gained little. She knew that the dragon palms was the beggar clan's most treasured weapon. The Heaven Mountain's 6 solar palms couldn't take advantage of it. So she changed her palm into a finger, aiming for his pulse. Song Qingshu felt that the sky was filled with the shadows of her hands, as if no matter where he dodged, his escape route would be blocked. He couldn't help but be shocked, realizing that this was the Heaven Mountain Plum Snapping Hand. Even though it was not as powerful as the Heaven Mountain's 6 solar palms, it was much more exquisite. The Heaven Mountain Plum Snapping Hand was the essence of Heaven Mountain Tong Lao's Kung Fu, and at the same time, it was also one of the most profound Kung Fu skills of the Xiaoyao sect. It contained swordplay, machete, whip, spear, claw, axe, and many other skills. It was extremely complicated. What was even more amazing was that the Heaven Mountain Plum Snapping Hand could never be learned completely. The higher the practitioner's internal energy, the more knowledge he would have. Any Kung Fu skills in the world could be used by the Heaven Mountain Plum Snapping Hand. Song Qingshu had experienced the Shaolin Temple's flower-pinching finger, multi-layered leaf finger, and so on. They were all about exquisite finger skills, but compared to the Heaven Mountain Plum Snapping Hand, they were not at the same level. He used the 18 dragon subduing palms to deal with it, but soon enough his meridians were almost sealed. If someone like Heaven Mountain Tong Lao sealed their meridians, it meant that their life and death were in her hands. Of course, it wasn't that the 18 dragon subduing palms wasn't powerful. It was just that this finger skill of hers had the effect of blocking all palm skills, weapons, and so on. It had a natural suppressive effect. Of course, if the user wasn't Heaven Mountain Tong Lao, but someone else with a lower level of cultivation, it would be difficult to achieve such a suppressive effect. Finally, Song Qingshu's arm was accidentally touched by her pinky, and his arm went numb. How could Heaven Mount and Tong Lao let go of such an opportunity? Taking advantage of this moment, her petite body entered his body, circled around his armpits, and in a flash sealed all the major meridians in his body. Ah! Yalu Nansien exclaimed from the side, clearly not expecting this turn of events. Don't worry, he won't die. Heaven Mountain Tong Lao glared at her. Didn't you want to kill him just now? Chapter 17:27. Song Qingshu sighed and said, although I'm not like those perverted gentlemen on the internet in my previous life, I have to admit that you have a special kind of attraction right now. It's just that your voice is a bit of killjoy. I wonder if there's any way to turn you into a soft baby voice. That should be the legal Lolita that those people dream of. Hearing his frivolous words, a hint of anger flashed across Tianshan Tong Lao's eyes. She rolled up her sleeves and slapped his face. Although her skill with her sleeves was not as superb as Li Qiushui's Hanshio acupoint brushing, her internal energy was more profound. If it hit, a normal person would still have their teeth knocked out and their brain split. Seeing that this general was about to suffer, Yalu Nansien opened her mouth, but Heaven Mountain Tong Lao was too fast. She couldn't stop her. But the scene she imagined didn't happen. Heaven Mountain Tong Lao's sleeve only hit a shadow. Feeling the force of her attack hitting thin air, Heaven Mountain Tong Lao was alarmed and quickly retreated. Unfortunately, her opponent was even faster, like a shadow following her. No matter how good her movements were, she couldn't shake him off. Yalu Nansien was dumbfounded. She thought her lightness skill was pretty good in the martial world, but the two people in front of her were too shocking. Heaven Mountain Tong Lao's movements were very strange. She moved left and right without any fixed direction, but she looked very beautiful. Because of her petite body, she looked like a butterfly dancing in the air. As for the general, his figure was even more exaggerated. His figure could not be seen clearly at all. One could only faintly see a wisp of smoke drifting around him. No matter how the butterfly flew, it could not get rid of the wisp of smoke that surrounded him. After a while, Heaven Mountain Tong Lao was unable to dodge. Her acupuncture point was sealed by Song Qingshu. She could not help but look at him in shock. I clearly sealed your acupuncture point just now. How can you still attack? How powerful was her internal energy? She had never seen anyone who was able to break through the acupoints of others she had sealed. This was something that completely subverted her entire life's understanding of martial arts. She was confident that even if Zhang Sanfeng of Wudong were to come here and had his acupoint sealed by her, he wouldn't be able to break through in a short period of time. Could it be that this person was more powerful than Zhang Sanfeng, who had 100 years of internal energy? But looking at his age, how is that possible? If I didn't do this, how could I lure you to let down your guard and approach me? Song Qingshu smiled. Heavenly Mountain Tong Lao's kung fu was too high, and it was not easy to capture her alive. Therefore, he came up with this plan. As for the reason why he was able to open the acupoints, it was all because he practiced the Taishan Sutra, which was equivalent to opening up a new meridian system in his body. The martial arts in the world had never even heard of these acupoints, so how could he open them? Who are you? Heavenly Mountain Tong Lao was shocked. Although it happened suddenly, as a grandmaster, she would not be so easily tricked. She used dozens of body movements. As long as she was a safe distance away, she would be able to take advantage of the situation to fight back. However, she could only blame herself for not being able to get rid of her opponent. Before Song Qingshu could answer, Tianshan Tong Lao scolded. Your movement just now had the shadow of wave-like subtle steps. Are you that bitch's new gigolo? Bitch? Song Qingshu was confused, but he quickly realized that she was referring to Li Qiushui. He could not help but sigh that the two of them had really loved each other for dozens of years, just for the same man. As for wave-like subtle steps, it was completely learned from Tang Sire and Li Qingluo, and he had integrated it into his own kung fu. Tianshan Tong Lao quickly refuted her guess. No, if that bitch had a gigolo like you, she would have invited you to Tianshan to seek revenge on me. I I have some history with Li Qiushui, but it's not what you think. Song Qingshu thought that with Li Qingluo's relationship, Li Qiushui could be counted as his cheap mother-in-law to some extent. Of course, they had some history. Tianshan Tonglao snorted. All the men who have a history with that bitch are her gigolos. But her gigolos used to be handsome young men. I didn't expect that after dozens of years, her taste has deteriorated so much. Being slapped in the face, Song Qingshu was also very depressed. Now you're my captive. I should be the one asking you, not you. Tianshan Tonglao did not care at all and continued to say, your acupoint technique is very similar to Dali's Duan family's solitary yang finger. Are you from the Duan family? Song Qingshu finally could not take it anymore. With a straight face, he said, now, only I have the right to ask you. Who hired you to kill Princess Qinggan? I am very curious about who in the world could hire the heavenly mountain Tonglao. I rule the world. Why would I listen to anyone's orders? This time I came out purely on a whim, can't I? Tianshan Tonglao snorted coldly. It's okay if you don't want to tell me. I have the best way to deal with women. Song Qingshu chuckled and deliberately put on a wretched expression. Every time I ask you a question, you have to answer a question, or I'll take off a piece of clothing from your body. I hope you wear more clothes when you go out today. Song Qingshu himself felt that this method was a bit too cunning, but he really could not think of a way to make someone like Tianshan Tonglao speak. After all, she had lived for more than 90 years and stood at the peak of the martial world. What kind of storms and waves had she not seen? How had she given so easily? After thinking about it, he could only come up with this method. After all, Tianshan Tonglao and Li Qiushui had been arguing for most of their lives, and she loved to mock Li Qiushui for being fickle and promiscuous. At the same time, she was proud of herself for keeping Wu Yazi's virginity. She must be very concerned about this kind of threat. Although it's a bit wretched, I'm in disguise now, so I won't be embarrassing myself. Seeing Yelu Nanxian's look of disdain, Song Qingshu kept comforting himself. Tianshan Tonglao's face flushed, and she laughed in anger. This seat is old enough to be your grandmother, and you dare to use this to threaten me? Although Elder Tonglao is old, from your appearance, you look like a 10-year-old girl. Not to mention, Elder Tonglau's steps are light, and her breath is clear, so you must still be a virgin. Song Qingshu answered without changing his expression. Yelu Nanxian looked at Tianshan Tonglao in shock, thinking, how is this possible? She didn't expect Tianshan Tonglao's reaction to be anger mixed with a bit of shyness, indirectly admitting this. Yelu Nanxian couldn't help but drop her jaw in shock. She looked at the general and gave him a, you can even see this? Look, you little bastard. Tianshan Tonglao couldn't hold back anymore, and suddenly, a few beams of cold light shot out from her hands. Song Qingshu's eyes were sharp, and he immediately recognized that they were the famous life-death notes. At such a close distance, and they were made by Heavenly Mountain Tonglao, Song Qingshu could only dodge them by a hair's breadth, even though he had used all his strength. Even so, he was still scratched by 2 of them. Chapter 17:28. How did you unseal your acupuncture points? Now, it was Song Qingshu's turn to ask the same question. With his martial arts, even a master cultivator wouldn't be able to move his acupuncture points. What's more, he was using the Duan family's solitary yang finger, the best acupuncture technique in the world. Even Ouyang Feng, who knew how to reverse the flow of meridians, wouldn't be able to unseal his acupuncture points like normal. He didn't expect Heaven Mountain Tonglao to imitate him, pretending to have her acupuncture points sealed. Then, she suddenly attacked. Even though he barely dodged it, Yelu Nanxian was injured. Heaven Mountain Tonglao smiled proudly. My 8 desolation 6 directions supremacy is so powerful. What can a mere acupuncture point seal do to me? She had cultivated this technique, turning her body into a petite lowly. Naturally, her meridians were different from normal people's. So, no matter how good Song Qingshu's acupuncture point seal technique was, unless he thoroughly studied her body, he wouldn't be able to hit her. At this time, a moan came from his side. Song Qing-shu didn't have time to think about how she unsealed her acupuncture points. He quickly went over to help Yilu Nancian up. When he found out that she had been hit by the life-death talisman, he looked at Heaven Mountain Tonglao in shock and anger. "You're a senior. How could you suddenly attack a junior? Where's your dignity?" Heavenly Mountain Tonglao put her hands behind her back and said disapprovingly, "Go and ask around in the pugilistic world. When did the Lord of Ethereal Peak's Vulture Palace become bound by all kinds of rules and regulations like those hypocritical white sects?" At this time, the life-death talisman in Yelu Nanshin's body had started to take effect. She felt like thousands of ants were biting her heart. Instinctively, she wanted to tear off her clothes. But when she remembered that there was a stranger next to her, she could only grit her teeth and endure it. But how could she endure the power of the life-death talisman with just willpower? After a while, she almost bit her lips until they bled. Heaven Mountain Tonglao said proudly, "You offended me. I'll give you a chance. If you kneel down and kowtow to me, I'll be merciful and give you an antidote." Her eyes were sharp. She could see that this marriage escort general treated Yilu Nancian differently. He naturally wouldn't allow her to suffer. This was also the reason why she ambushed Yilu Nancian just now. Song Qing-shu ignored her, hugged Yilu Nancian, and asked, "Which acupoints on your body were hit by the life and death talismans?" Zi Gong Ling, Ling Su Guan Yuan Fu Tu. Yilu Nancian was, after all, a powerful warrior of the young generation. Although she couldn't dodge the sneak attack, she could tell which acupoints were hit. However, under the effect of the life-death notes, she had to squeeze out these acupoints from between her teeth. These acupoints were on her chest, lower abdomen, and thigh. Song Qing-shu thought that this Heaven Mountain Tonglao was really cruel, using 4 life-death talismans on her body. Remember that the underworld leaders who controlled the 36 islands and 72 caves only used 1 life-death talisman each, and it was already enough to make them beg for death. Yet, she used 4 on a little girl like Yilu Nancian. Seeing him asking about the acupoints, Heavenly Mountain Tonglao sneered and said, "It's useless. The life and death spell can only be undone by my unique technique. If you don't kneel down, the little girl will scratch your body into pieces. She is so beautiful, and her skin is so delicate and smooth. It will be a pity to scratch her. If her skin is scratched into pieces, even if I detoxify her, she won't be able to live." Song Qing-shu didn't care about her sarcasm. He placed his hand on Yilu Nanshin's back and began to suppress the poison in her body. He had been hit by the life-death talisman before. He knew that the key to the life-death talisman was the yin and yang qi. Depending on how much yang qi and yin qi was used, the method to cure it would be different. However, he had the most profound understanding of yin and yang qi in this world, so the life-death talismans that could shake the entire martial world wasn't a problem for him. Seeing him trying to cure the poison with his true qi, Heaven Mountain Tonglao sneered. "If my life-death talismans were so easy to cure, those people on the 36 islands and 72 caves wouldn't be willing to listen to my orders. I'm not afraid to tell you, if you are hit by the life-death talisman and don't know how to cure it, the more you cultivate, the faster the poison will act." However, her voice gradually became softer, because she saw Yilu Nanshian's pained expression lighten, and she wasn't tearing her clothes as hard as before. Her emotions were also calming down. How is this possible? Heaven Mountain Tonglao had been shocked too many times today. Not only was this young man's martial arts so powerful, not only was she unable to seal his acupoints, not only was his qin gong better than hers, but now he even knew how to cure her unique technique. Was there still any justice in this world? Seeing the white mist rising from Yilu Nanshian's head, Heaven Mountain Tonglao's heart skipped a beat. She didn't know why this was happening, but she knew that if given enough time, this mysterious person could cure the life-death talisman, and that would be troublesome. As soon as she thought of that, her figure flickered and she shot towards Song Qing-shu, planning on heavily injuring him while he was distracted. She was a leader of the corrupt path, and she didn't care about rules. She naturally didn't care about sneak attacks. Song Qing-shu's brows furrowed. He had gone through many dangerous situations, so it wasn't like he wasn't prepared for this situation. Curing the life-death talisman was a delicate task, and there couldn't be any mistakes. So, he planned to temporarily suppress the life-death talisman in Yelu Nanshin's body, and when it was safe, he would slowly cure her. He didn't expect Heaven Mountain Tonglao to be so heavy-handed, leaving 4 life-death talismans in her body. Suppressing the life-death talismans would take a long time, but Heaven Mountain Tonglao just had to act now. But if he let Yelu Nanshin go now, all his previous efforts would be in vain. The life-death talismans that were about to be suppressed would backfire even more violently than before. No matter how strong Yelu Nanshin's willpower was, she wouldn't be able to endure it, and her body would be torn to shreds. For a beautiful woman like her, even if her life-death talismans were cured, she wouldn't be able to accept such an ending. Without a choice, Song Qingshu pressed one hand on her back to continue suppressing the life-death talismans in her body, and used the other to fight against Heaven Mountain Tonglao. Seeing him being so careless, Heaven Mountain Tonglao laughed angrily. "You want to fight me with one hand? Even if it's Zhang Sanfeng fighting me with one hand, his blood would be splattered 3 feet high." Then, he used Heaven Mountain Plum, Snapping Hand, and 6 Solar Palm at the same time, taking into account the subtlety and power of the moves, instantly sealing off all of his opponent's escape routes. As expected of Heaven Mountain Tonglao, who kills without a second move, Song Qingshu's expression was solemn. Since things had come to this, he didn't dare to hold back anymore. Since his opponent had sealed off all of his escape routes, then he would use force to break through. Chapter 17:29. However, Heavenly Mountain Tonglao didn't look proud at all. Instead, she looked serious. Innate sword chi. Song Qingshu pushed her away with his sword chi. Seeing that she was in a daze, he ignored her and continued to help Yelu Nanshin suppress the life and death spell. "I heard that there is a surviving member of the Hui Sword sect called Zhubu Fan. He practiced hard in Changbai Mountain for 20 years and got a sword manual. The tip of his sword can emit a half-foot sword aura. I was amazed at the rapid progress of martial arts in the world. I didn't expect that you could use such amazing sword chi. In comparison, Zhuo Bufan's half-foot sword aura is not worth mentioning." Tianshan Tonglao sighed. She felt that the new generation was replacing the old. However, she quickly regained her composure and said, "But a mere sword chi can't scare me." She slowly raised her hands, and an almost transparent outline could be vaguely seen on the edge of her delicate hands. Chi blade. Song Qingshu's heart skipped a beat. He had seen Shuzhu use the Northern Dark Chi blade during the Golden Snake competition. At that time, he thought it was a special attack of the Northern Dark Divine Art. Now, it seemed that this blade technique was a special martial art of the Carefree sect. As long as one's inner force reached a certain level, one could turn chi into a blade. As for whether it was the Northern Dark Divine Art, the Small Formless Method, or the 8 Desolation and 6 Directions Palace, it didn't matter much. In this short amount of time, Heaven Mountain Tonglao had already gathered enough saber chi, slashing it down on Yelu Nanshin's body. Before the saber chi arrived, the courtyard was already filled with sand and pebbles. Many of Yelu Nanshin's hairs were even cut off. If the saber chi landed, the two of them would definitely die together. Looking at the looming, huge blade, Song Qingshu immediately realized that this attack was much more powerful than the one Shuzhu used during the Golden Snake competition. If it was 1 or 2 years ago, he might not be able to block it even if he used both hands, let alone one hand. However, after practicing the Taishin Sutra, Yi Futian's martial arts had reached a whole new level. His attainments in sword chi and lightness skill made him stand at the top of the Jianghu. He raised his right hand, and a faint golden sword chi rose into the air to meet the huge chi blade. With a loud bang, the entire backyard was in a mess. The trees were all split into pieces, and the cuts were smooth as if they had been cut by a sharp weapon. The windows on the walls were shattered, and there were deep scratches all over the stone walls. As for the corpses of the Kong Tong sect assassins, none of them were intact. This was the result of the collision between the world-shaking sword chi and the saber chi. In the entire backyard, only Heavenly Mountain Tonglao, Song Qing Shu, and Yelu Nanxian were left unharmed. Witnessing all of this, Yelu Nanxian's red lips were slightly agape. The shock in her heart was indescribable. Usually, she prided herself on her high martial arts skills, but now that she witnessed it with her own eyes, she finally realized how big of a gap there was between her and the world's top experts. Her Sun Moon Divine Sword used the brilliance of the sun and the moon to win by surprise. It was exquisite, but not powerful enough. When she met someone who was not as good as her, or even someone who was at the same level as her, she could use her exquisite swordsmanship to take them by surprise. However, when she met those top-notch grandmasters, her exquisite swordsmanship was useless in front of their experienced and sharp eyes. Instead, she was easily controlled by her opponent. She was defeated by Ouyang Feng in the past, and she was defeated by Tianshan Tonglao today. At this moment, Tianshan Tonglao did not hesitate at all. She moved her body and used her hand as a blade to attack. Although it was unbelievable, she knew that her full-force attack was blocked by her opponent with just one hand. Her opponent's martial arts level might be slightly higher than hers. If she did not take the opportunity to kill him while he was busy healing, she would be in trouble when he was free. Heavenly Mountain Tonglao came from the free and unfettered sect. Unlike the righteous sects, they didn't have so many rules and regulations. She made a decision in a split second. She turned into a black shadow and used her blade energy to attack her opponent. In fact, she was more proficient in the Heavenly Mountain Plum Snapping Hand, which was used to counter all kinds of hidden weapons, and fist techniques. However, her opponent's sword energy was formless and invisible. She couldn't block it with her bare hands. If she wasn't careful, her fingers would be cut off by the sword energy. This made it impossible for her to use her exquisite plum snapping hand. She could only use her chi as a blade to fight against her opponent's sword energy. Song Qing Shu, on the other hand, used the Heavenly Mountain Plum snapping hand. Although he could only use one hand, he still had 5 fingers. Although he had never practiced the 6 pulses godly sword technique, he knew the theory behind it. He also knew how to use sword energy. Therefore, he was able to unleash the same effect as the 6 pulses godly sword technique. He cultivated the essence of the 5 mountains godly sword, experienced Dugu Qiubai's invincible sword intent in the sword catacomb, sparred with Feng Qingyang and Ling Hucheng's solitary 9 swords, and then cultivated the supreme sword technique of the Supreme Mystery Sutra. Just based on his understanding of sword techniques and the level of exquisiteness of his sword techniques, even Duan Siping, the creator of the 6 pulses godly sword technique, might not be able to compete with him. His 5 fingers moved up and down, using the formless sword energy to unleash a mysterious sword technique that forced Heavenly Mountain Tonglao to not be able to get within 3 feet of him. How is this possible? The more Heavenly Mountain Tonglao fought, the more shocked she became. Her opponent was sitting there, healing Yelu Nanxian with one hand and calmly dealing with her with the other. He couldn't even move his feet. Even so, she couldn't do anything to him. On the contrary, she was almost injured by his sword energy several times. Seeing that she couldn't defeat him, Heavenly Mountain Tonglao understood that her saber art couldn't win against this exquisite sword art. She put away her saber energy and moved like a ghost, circling around the 2 of them, looking for opportunities to shoot out her life and death talismans. Her opponent couldn't move at all, making him a living target. Her life and death talismans specialized in breaking internal Jinqi. As long as her opponent missed even one life and death talisman, no matter how strong his defensive Jinqi was, his life and death would be in her hands. Song Qingshu's expression was serious as he waved his sword energy to cut down the life and death talismans that were coming at him from all directions. What made him angry was that his opponent didn't have the demeanor of a master. He knew that his defense was tight, So most of the life and death talismans were aimed at Yellow Nancian. He knew what his opponent was trying to do. By attacking Yellow Nancian from the back, he was forced to defend himself. Every movement would make him vulnerable. Being in this kind of situation for a long time, one mistake, and he would be doomed. In order to change the situation, he had to catch his opponent off guard. Suddenly, he shouted, and sword energy shot out in all directions. It was a 365-degree attack. Facing this kind of AoE attack, no matter how fast Heavenly Mountain Tonglao was, she couldn't dodge it. She had to back off and quickly get out of the range of her opponent's attack. What is this technique called? Heavenly Mountain Tonglao asked in surprise. Million returning swords. Song Qingshu smiled, but there was a hint of meaning in his smile. Just as Heavenly Mountain Tonglao was about to attack again, her expression suddenly changed. Life and death talismans. She hurriedly sat down with one hand pointing to the sky and the other pointing to the ground, and started healing herself. It turned out that Song Qingshu had used the sword energy as a cover to shoot out a few life and death talismans. Heavenly Mountain Tonglao was indeed distracted by the million returning swords and didn't notice the almost transparent life and death talismans. How come you know life and death talismans? This was the thing that Heavenly Mountain Tonglao didn't understand. She had been guarding against her opponent's sword energy, and she didn't expect that she would be defeated by her own special skill. However, she was more skilled in life and death talismans than Song Qingshu, so she could also dissolve the life and death talismans in her body. What goes around comes around. Just now, when he was healing Yellow Nancian, he could only passively take a beating. Now, it was Heavenly Mountain Tonglao's turn to heal. Of course, Song Qingshu wouldn't fall for her trick of buying time. He performed the one sun finger and shot a finger wind at her. Chapter 17:30. Feeling the wind coming at her, Heavenly Mountain Tonglao pressed her hand on the ground and hurriedly retreated, dodging the solitary yang finger wind. However, when she was healing, she felt her chi and blood churning, and she couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. Her cultivation technique was special, and her blood contained her inner energy and cultivation. She couldn't waste a single drop of blood. Now that she spat out such a large mouthful of blood, it was obvious that she was severely injured. Heavenly Mountain Tonglao was indeed a leader of the underworld. She knew that if she stayed here any longer, she would probably die. She quickly suppressed her injuries and used the Carefree Faction's Supreme Lightness skill to leave the backyard. She humphed unwillingly. Little brat, I will come back next time. Song Qingshu was speechless. He thought to himself that Grey Wolf and Pokemon's Team Rocket would often leave behind such a sentence at the end. Heavenly Mountain Tonglao's villainous nature was really strong. However, he admired her decisiveness. If she stayed a little longer, he would be able to suppress the notes of life and death in Heavenly Mountain Tonglao's body. At that time, he would be able to free himself, and it wouldn't be so easy for her to leave. Thank you for saving me, General. At this time, Yellow Nancian also stood up and thanked him. At the same time, she looked up and down at him with her beautiful eyes. She seemed to be happy, but also a little suspicious. Suddenly, the night wind blew by, and she felt a slight chill. Looking down, she couldn't help but blush. It turned out that the 4 notes of life and death were very powerful. She felt like thousands of ants were biting her heart. Even though she tried her best to control it, she still tore her dress, causing her snow-white skin to be partly visible. Song Qingshu thoughtfully took off his jacket and put it on her. Don't thank me too early. We were in a hurry just now, and I only temporarily suppressed the notes of life and death in your body. It will act up again in a dozen or so hours. Yellow Nancian was wrapped in a man's jacket, feeling the warmth of the man's aura. She was in a daze when she heard what he said, and her face paled. She still had lingering fear when the life-death talismans acted up, and she didn't want to experience it again. Don't worry, I couldn't get rid of the life-death note for you just now, because Heavenly Mountain Tonglao was beside you. I could only suppress it temporarily. However, She escaped with injuries. If you don't want to leave any hidden dangers, you must find a place to heal as soon as possible. So, she won't come back for a while. I will completely dissolve the life-death note in your body. Song Qing-shu comforted her. Yes. Yellow Nancian nodded slightly. No one knew what she was thinking, but her attitude towards him was clearly not as resistant as before. The rest of the people in the envoy group are most likely drugged. Wait for me to wake them up so that they won't be disturbed when I'm healing them. Yellow Nancian naturally didn't have any objections. At this time, her dress was a bit disheveled, so it wasn't convenient for her to go with him. She returned to her room first. Song Qing-shu first ran to Xiao Huandu to wake him up with cold water. When he realized what had just happened, he couldn't help but shiver in fear. General Xiao, thank goodness you were here. Otherwise, I'm afraid all of us would have died here. It's fine if we died, but if we caused the princess to be kidnapped and war broke out between the two countries, we would become the greatest sinners of Great Liao. Song Qing-shu saw how loyal and patriotic he was at the moment, and then thought of how he had asked the young girl to serve him in bed when he saw her. It was hard for Song Qing-shu to put the two faces together. In order to make sure he didn't have to worry, Xiao Huandu purposely ran to the backyard to pay his respects to Yellow Nancian. After making sure she was fine, he finally relaxed. Only then did he notice that the backyard looked like it had been ravaged by a tornado. He couldn't help but click his tongue. When he heard that the little girl was actually the famous Heaven Mountain Maiden, his eyes almost popped out of their sockets. I actually dare to flirt with Heaven Mountain Maiden. Xiao Huandu's back was drenched in cold sweat. He touched his neck in fear. Damn it, when I get back, I must burn some incense and thank my ancestors for their protection. Song Qing-shu thought to himself, rather than thanking your ancestors, you might as well thank me. He immediately scolded Xiao Huandu with a smile and sent him to wake up the other members of the envoy group. Not long after, the entire envoy group returned to normal. Because a few assassins had just died in the backyard, blood and flesh splattered everywhere. The scene was a bit disgusting. Naturally, it wasn't suitable for the princess to stay there. But the relay station was only so big, it was hard to find another place. In the end, it was Song Qing-shu who offered his room to the princess. Xiao Huandu was put in a difficult position, thinking that it was one thing for the princess to move to another man's room. But everyone knew about the princess's attitude towards him on the way here. How could he possibly agree? He thought he would be rejected, but Yellow Nancian actually agreed without hesitation. Adultery? This was the first thought that popped into Xiao Huandu's mind. But it was really unimaginable. The thought quickly disappeared. After changing rooms, Song Qing-shu stayed next to Yellow Nancian. Originally, it was a bit inappropriate for a foreign official to stay so close to a married princess, but because of the commotion just now, everyone was already frightened by the mere twang of a bow. With him staying by the princess' side to protect her, everyone felt a bit more at ease. After everyone packed up and left, Song Qing-shu directly went to the room next door and knocked on the door. The one who opened the door was Yellow Nancian's maid. She had just been knocked unconscious and had already woken up. Because she knew he was the one who saved everyone, the maid's attitude towards him improved a lot. But when she heard him wanting to enter the room so late at night, she couldn't help but be dumbfounded. General, I'm afraid this is inappropriate. The princess has been poisoned. I need to treat her injuries as soon as possible. Song Qing-shu explained. This should we inform Lord Xiao? The maidservant had an awkward expression on her face. It had to be known that a maidservant's life, honor, and disgrace were closely related to their masters. If there was any scandal in the future, their masters might not be able to live well, but they might not necessarily die. However, a maidservant like her would definitely die. If this matter were to spread out, it wouldn't be good for your princess, right? Song Qing-shu said. The maid rolled her eyes, thinking that since he knew it wouldn't be good, why did he still come here in the middle of the night? Just as she was about to find another reason to refuse, Yellow Nancian's voice came from inside the room. Let him in. The maid was dumbfounded, turning around to look at the man in front of her, thinking that she had only been unconscious for 2 hours. How did their relationship suddenly become so? But since her master had already spoken, what else could she do? She could only helplessly invite Song Qing-shu in. I hope General can hurry. After all, it would be inappropriate if someone found out. She had already made up her mind to stand guard outside, and if anything happened outside, she would immediately report back. After all, this was related to her family's life. Song Qing-shu laughed involuntarily. The princess and I are open and above board, yet you make it sound like we're having an affair. The maid thought to herself, who was it that said it wouldn't be good if someone found out? She lightly snorted and closed the door for him. This general greets the princess. Song Qing-shu thought to himself, women will always be women. They had just changed rooms, yet the air was already filled with the fragrance of cosmetics. General, no need to be so courteous. Yilu Nancian leisurely walked out from the inner room. She had already changed into a light green dress. Her face was as delicate as porcelain, and her skin was white and delicate. Her slender figure was light and graceful, and her body was soft and delicate, but her breasts were unusually full. Song Qing-shu began to despise himself. What did he care about all day long? Feeling his burning gaze, Yilu Nancian blushed, but for the first time, she didn't get angry. What do I need to prepare to dissolve the life-death talisman? There's nothing special to prepare. The only requirement is that the poisoned person needs to take off their clothes. Song Qing-shu answered without thinking. Yilu Nancian frowned, lightly said, General, do you know what you're saying? Song Qing-shu smiled bitterly. I know the princess will misunderstand, but I really don't have any ulterior motives. Also, if the princess is worried, I will cover my eyes during the entire process. If you cover your eyes and touch something you shouldn't touch, then you won't be blamed? Yilu Nancian directly exposed his thoughts. Huh? Song Qing-shu was startled, thinking, why don't you play by the rules? Yilu Nancian sneered, I can be considered half a martial artist. I've always been curious. When martial artists treat men's internal injuries, they usually keep their clothes on, but when it comes to treating women's injuries, they often ask the women to take off their clothes. In the end, isn't this a trick of you men? Song Qing-shu answered with a straight face. Scientific research has proven that a man's body fat percentage is between 1% to 20%, and a woman's body fat percentage is between 1% to 22%, much higher than a man's. Most of this fat is stored under the skin, blocking the meridians, which is a big hindrance to the treatment process. Think about it. A woman, after an injury, has a slightly higher body fat percentage, and with the cover of her clothes, it's a double hindrance, affecting the use of internal energy. Direct treatment can't achieve the best results. It's life-threatening. Yilu Nancian. The two stared at each other. The room fell into an awkward silence. Song Qing-shu guiltily added, the life and death talisman uses thin ice cubes to inject yin and yang qi into the meridians. It also needs the corresponding yin and yang qi to dissolve it. After the ice cubes are dissolved, it turns into steam, which needs to be expelled from the body through the skin. If it's blocked by clothes, it's easy to fail. You're talking nonsense with a straight face. Yilu Nancian spat lightly, but even though she said that, her feet moved towards the inner chamber. Come inside. Song Qing-shu was surprised. He followed her into the bedroom and saw her slowly loosening the silk belt around her waist. He was dumbfounded. Princess, what are you doing? Yilu Nancian paused. Didn't you tell me to take off my clothes to treat my injuries? I told you to take them off, so you took them off? Song Qing-shu wasn't happy at all. Instead, he was angered. Then if I told you to sleep with me, would you sleep with me? Yilu Nancian blushed. She mumbled, You didn't ask me to sleep with you. Song Qing-shu suddenly felt annoyed. Do you know what it means to take off your clothes in front of a man you don't know? What are the consequences? Out of bad taste, he purposely hid his identity to tease Yilu Nancian, but he didn't think things would develop like this. If she really took off her clothes, what would that mean? Would he cheat on himself? What consequences? Yilu Nancian asked lightly. Song Qing-shu was speechless. He didn't know how to explain. Either way, it won't work. Yilu Nancian sneered. You're the one who told me to take off my clothes, and now you're the one who's angry. Is there something wrong with your brain? Song Qing Shu. Chapter 1731. Suddenly, Yelloon Nancian giggled. All right, brother Song. I know it's you that's why. Song Qing Shu was taken aback. His face darkened. Do I look like your brother Song? Yelloon Nancian giggled. I know you can disguise yourself. Not to mention, in this world, who else can use the 18 dragons subduing palms to such a level? She had seen Song Qing Shu use the 18 dragons subduing palms to fight Ouyang Feng's toad skill on Divine Dragon Island, so she recognized it. The 18 dragons subduing palms is the beggar sect's secret art. Who knows how many people know it? Maybe one or two can reach this level, but it doesn't mean anything. Song Qing Shu's face was still dark. But there's also your sword energy. Does anyone else in the martial world know 10,000 returning swords? Yellow Nancian's eyes were like crescent moons, full of amusement. There are so many sword experts in the martial world. Many of them know sword energy. Do you really believe a random shout of 10,000 returning swords? Song Qing Shu was still in a bad mood. Precisely because he was an expert in disguise, he had always been worried that someone would try to impersonate him. Seeing Yellow Nancian, thinking that a man with a different face could be him with just a few clues, of course he wasn't happy. There are many, but you know the 18 dragons subduing palms, no 10,000 returning swords, and Yellow Nancian suddenly stuttered. And what? Song Qing Shu was very curious. How did she determine his identity? Such a cheap person, Brother Song, is the only one in the world. Yellow Nancian's lips curled up. Clearly she was very happy at this moment. Song Qing Shu, all right, don't be angry. Do you remember when my dress was torn? You put your coat on me? Actually, I was the last one to confirm it because Yellow Nancian suddenly blushed, stuttering. Because I remember your scent. Song Qing Shu was stunned. Was this a woman's talent? It seemed like many women could clearly distinguish the scents of their own men. On the contrary, it was difficult for men to distinguish the scents of women. In any case, it was the fragrance of rouge and face powder. Then he felt pity for Yellow Nancian. He and Yellow Nancian actually only had one night of marriage. It was a freak accident. He didn't think she would remember this feeling so deeply in her heart. At this time, he no longer had the mood to tease her. He took off his mask and revealed his face. Sister Nancian, I'm sorry, Nancian. Yellow Nancian said blankly, Originally, you promised me that you would come and be my great general, but I didn't see you that day. At that time, I was really disheartened. I thought that since you didn't care about me, I might as well marry that crown prince of Western Xia. Song Qing Shu smiled bitterly and said, I was in Sichuan before. Something happened there, so I was delayed. However, I rushed here without stopping. I traveled day and night without any rest. Yellow Nancian couldn't help but snort. I really didn't scold you. You obviously came here, but you still deliberately deceived me. Song Qing Shu's expression was gloomy. It's not like you don't know that my current identity can't be revealed, so I had to change my identity. Also, I wanted to tell you as soon as I came, but unfortunately, you didn't even see me. Yellow Nancian was a little embarrassed. I was angry at you at that time, and I thought the general wasn't you. I was in a bad mood, so I didn't give him a good face. Song Qing Shu gently pulled her into his arms. Don't worry. Now that I'm here, you don't have to worry about anything. Yellow Nancian nodded. In truth, she couldn't really explain her relationship with Song Qing Shu. In the beginning, she admired him and had a good impression of him, but after the incident that happened that night in Yangzhou, she didn't know how she felt at that time. She just didn't know how to face Song Qing Shu. So early the next morning, she quietly left. Later, when she met him in Liao, she felt familiar and strange. She wanted to be close to him, but she felt something was missing, and she wanted to stay away, but she didn't want to. It was not until she got married to the Western Xia country this time that the sadness and disappointment in her heart gradually made her realize something. A moment ago, he protected her with one hand and fought against the famous heavenly mountain Tong Lao with the other, regardless of the danger. She could even hear the sound of her heartbeat. It was not nervousness or fear, but a kind of palpitating heartbeat. Don't talk. Let's get rid of the life and death spell in your body first, or I won't be at ease. Thinking that the poison in her body was a time bomb, Song Qing-shu said hurriedly, "Do I really have to take off my clothes?" Yilu Nancian suddenly lowered her voice. "Actually, it's not necessary, but the effect will be better if you take it off." Song Qing-shu laughed awkwardly. Yilu Nancian glared at him. I knew it. Just as Song Qing-shu was feeling awkward, he suddenly saw Yilu Nancian's slender hands lightly untie the belt around her waist, slowly pulling her dress down from her shoulders, revealing her back that was like the finest white jade. Her skin was exposed to the air, and he could faintly see that her body was slightly trembling. He didn't know if it was because the air was too cold or because she was too nervous. Song Qing-shu put his hand on her shoulder and said softly, "Don't be nervous. Leave the rest to me." Feeling the heat from his palm, Yilu Nancian nodded almost inaudibly. That night in Yangzhou was a blur, but this time she was the one who took the initiative to take off her clothes in front of this man. How could she not be nervous? Song Qing-shu paused, then reminded her, "Oh right, because the life and death spells acupuncture points are Zi Gong, Ling Su, Guan Yuan, and Fu Tu. I might move my hand to the corresponding acupuncture points." These acupuncture points corresponded to the chest, lower abdomen, and thighs. If it wasn't someone close to her, it would be difficult to treat. This was also why Song Qing-shu chose to suppress the life and death spell instead of removing it right away in the backyard. Seeing that Yilu Nancian didn't speak, Song Qing-shu asked again, "Sister Nancian?" Yilu Nancian finally spoke, but her tone was 70% shy and 30% angry. "I've already taken off my clothes, and you still keep asking me about this." Song Qing-shu paused, then couldn't help but laugh. This time, it was Yilu Nancian's turn to be embarrassed. Am I too rude? You are a beautiful rouge horse that grew up on the grasslands. If your personality is as bashful as a Jiangnan Water Village woman, it would be a bit inappropriate." Song Qing-shu gently tidied her waterfall-like hair and said softly, "You're calling me a horse?" Yilu Nancian turned around angrily. Her beautiful eyes widened. "A horse is meant to be ridden." At this point, she suddenly realized something and spat, "Rogue." Song Qing-shu looked down at her, couldn't help but wipe the blood from his nose. "Ahem, aren't you forcing me to become a pervert?" Yilu Nancian didn't understand. Following his gaze, she lowered her head, then realized that she had taken off her clothes. When she turned around, "Didn't that mean, ah?" Yilu Nancian really screamed this time. Like a startled rabbit, she hurriedly turned around, throwing the pillow at the man behind her. "Get out. I don't want to treat you anymore." Of course, Song Qing-shu wasn't stupid enough to go out. He knew that she was still young and couldn't bring herself to do it so quickly. He went over and pulled her into his arms. "Let's stop fooling around. Let's start treating now, in case the sun comes up." Yilu Nancian didn't have time to reply. Suddenly, a cry came from the door. The two of them looked towards the source of the sound, only to see the maid standing at the door staring at them in shock. The maid was about to go crazy. She had taken a huge risk to let this marriage escort general into the princess room. Her heart was on tenterhooks the whole time. Unfortunately, she didn't know martial arts. She couldn't hear anything from the door. She could only silently pray for the marriage escort general to come out as soon as possible. Unfortunately, the heavens didn't seem to heed her pleas. The marriage escort general still hadn't come out. She couldn't help but stick her ear to the door, wanted to hear what was going on inside. At that moment, the princess screamed. She instinctively opened the door and rushed in, just in time to see the princess sitting naked on the bed, the marriage escort general holding her in his arms. "How dare you, Xiao Beishen, offend a princess?" The maidservant's mind went blank. The thing she was most worried about had finally happened. If anything happened to the princess and it affected the marriage alliance between the two countries, she would definitely die a horrible death. Because she was so flustered, she did not realize that the general who was supposed to escort the bride had changed his appearance. She only saw his clothes and subconsciously thought that he was Xiao Beishan. Yelu Nansien wanted nothing more than to strangle this man behind her, making her embarrass herself in front of the maid. But now, she had no other choice. She couldn't let the maid alert the other people in the envoy group. Xiao Xian, go out, Yelu Nansien ordered. Song Qing-shu was surprised. So this maid was called Xiao Xian. She must have taken Yelu Nanxian's name. But her surname couldn't be Shangwan, right? The maid called Xiao Xian said anxiously. But the princess, Yelu Nansien, said, I told you to go out just now. Just now. Don't mention what you saw to anyone. At this point, how could the maid not understand that it wasn't the marriage escort general who forced her miss? It was clearly a consensual, adulterous couple. It was no wonder she had such a big grudge. After all, the other party was the one who enjoyed it. But the one who lost her life in the end was very likely to be the maid. No matter how she looked at it, it was a losing deal. But she was saved by the miss from the slave market when she was young and grew up with the miss. Although they were master and servant in name, they were as close as sisters. Now, she could only cover up for the miss. She glared fiercely at the man, but he seemed to be guilty and didn't dare to look back at her. Xiao Xian had no choice but to leave, planning to help the two of them keep watch outside. I really don't have the face to see anyone now. Seeing the maid leave, Yelu Nanxian's face was like a burning cloud. Song Qing-shu didn't mind. She's your personal maid. We can hide what happened between us for a day or two, but can we hide it forever? It's good that she finds out now. Oh right, her surname isn't Shangwan, is it? Chapter 1732. Song Qing-shu didn't expect that he would create the famous Shangwan Xiaoxian with just a few words, but he knew that it was just a coincidence. After all, although the maid looked delicate and pretty, according to the legends, she was not only the richest woman in the world, but she also had martial arts that allowed her to dominate the martial arts world. Not only was she well-versed in martial arts, her intelligence was also top-notch, and she was also a rare beauty in this world. She had a wonderful allure, enough to make most men fall into sin. Her childlike face had an indescribable charm and innocence, and her eyes were round and bright. Every inch of her womanly body seemed to emit an irresistible heat. She was as beautiful as a fairy, and her appearance was like the spirit of a plum blossom, a fairy from the heavens. At the same time, her voice was like the gentle breeze of a spring evening. This is the home field of the Golden Book. Characters like the ancient dragon should stand aside. Of course, Song Qing-shu knew that this maid wasn't the woman in his memory, but this name made him recall some things from his previous life, and he couldn't help but sigh. What's wrong? Yelu Nanxian asked curiously. Song Qing-shu shook his head. Nothing, let's start healing. After the episode, just now, the two of them were no longer as bashful as before. Song Qing-shu's expression had also returned to normal, and he began to remove the life and death talismans from her body. However, this made things difficult for Yelu Nanxian. Song Qing-shu was an experienced player, and he was able to stay calm even when he was in love. She had been a young girl who had kept her chastity for more than 10 years. Although she had a muddled night in Yangzhou, it didn't affect her young girl mentality too much. Now, feeling the heat from his palms seeping into her skin, her heart was beating so fast that it almost jumped out of her throat. Especially when she felt his hot palms roaming around her body. Yelu Nanxian's eyes were about to tear up. That night in Yangzhou was too muddled, and she was filled with fear and terror. She had no way of experiencing the process, but it was different now. Whether it was the relationship between the two of them or her mentality, it made her feel much more relaxed. After all, she was only a teenage girl and was far from the age to be greedy for pleasure. At this time, her heart was filled with a kind of inexperienced sweetness mixed with a bit of ignorance and shyness. But not long after, her expression suddenly changed because she felt warm all over. There was a strange feeling gradually rising from the depths of her body, gradually turning into a ball of air, as if it wanted to pull out her throat. It turned out that removing the life and death charm required the use of yin and yang qi. The whole process was like slaughtering a chicken, every cell in the body would tremble with joy. But Yelu Nancian didn't understand all this. She just thought it was because of her special body constitution. She couldn't help but grit her teeth and endure it. She was worried that if she made some shameful sound, her boyfriend would think she was a fickle woman. A young girl's mind was always this complicated and nervous, afraid of leaving the slightest bad impression. But there were many things that couldn't be resisted by willpower, and from time to time, that sweet sound still seeped out of her mouth. Feeling the pain that the young girl was trying to suppress, Song Qing-shu was experienced and quickly understood what was going on. He said softly, "You don't have to endure it. It's not good for your body." He then explained the general principle of removing the life and death charm, telling her that this was the most normal reaction of the human body. Yelu Nancian was already on the verge of collapse, but when she heard his words, it was as if she heard the most beautiful sound in the world, and she completely relaxed. However, the moment she relaxed, Song Qing-shu suffered. He had been healing her with a clear mind, but when he heard her moaning, he felt his mouth go dry. The young girl's passionate voice was the most beautiful music in the world. In addition to the sweat from healing, the young girl's natural and fresh scent lingered in the tent, and the feeling of youth and vitality from her palm made one's heart even more restless. Song Qing-shu persevered with great willpower, completely removing the life and death charm for her. At this time, his eyes were already red, and his body was as hot as fire. Yelu Nancian's eyes were blurry, and her body was soft as if she didn't have any bones, lying in his arms, waiting for him to do whatever he wanted. This is the sweet after the bitter. The thought flashed through Song Qing-shu's mind, and he was about to kiss the beautiful girl's red lips when suddenly there was a knock on the door. "Princess, princess!" It was the maid Xiao Xian's voice. "What is it?" As soon as Yelu Nancian said those words, even she was startled. Her voice was no longer as clear and bright as usual. Instead, it was as sweet as honey. Song Qing-shu's face was also gloomy. This maid had interrupted him time and time again, and he was wondering if he should seal her meridian points the next time he came. "It's morning." The maid's voice was also filled with speechlessness. These two had been inside for the whole night. Did they really not pay attention to the time? When the people in the envoy group woke up one after another, if they saw the marriage general staying in the princess's room, it would definitely cause an uproar. Hearing the maid's reminder, Song Qing-shu glanced at the window and saw that the sky outside was getting brighter. Only then did he realize that after the battle with Heaven Mountain Maiden and the removal of 4 life and death charms, time had indeed passed very quickly. Yelu Nancian had regained the shyness and restraint of a young girl. She wrapped the blanket around her body and said in a small voice, "Brother Song, you should leave quickly. It won't be good if other people see you." Song Qing-shu's expression was a little gloomy, so depressing. Seeing his expression, Yelu Nancian couldn't bear to see him like this. "You can come back at night." After saying that, she embarrassedly buried her whole body in the quilt, leaving only her beautiful black hair outside. Okay. Song Qing-shu's mood instantly improved. He quickly changed his clothes, put on his mask again, and walked out. Looking at his brisk pace and his irrepressible proud expression as he walked, the maidservant Xiao Xian felt a burst of displeasure in her heart. She glared fiercely at his back, then closed the door and nervously ran to her mistress's side. "Your Grace, are you all right?" I'm fine." Yelu Nancian felt a little awkward. Her voice was a little lacking in confidence. This bastard really doesn't know how to be gentle with the fair sex. Sensing the strangeness in her master's voice, the maid Xiao Xian immediately misunderstood, thinking that she had been tormented for the whole night. Yelu Nancian's face became even redder. She hurriedly explained, "Song, General Xiao is only treating my injuries. Don't think too much." "Treating injuries?" The maid Xiao Xian cursed inwardly. "Miss, do you think I'm an idiot? A man and a woman alone in a room for the whole night. And just now I saw you taking off your clothes and being held in his arms. Even a pig wouldn't believe you if you said you were treating injuries. You might as well say he was doing your hair." "That's right, princess. You have a noble status. He's just an inferior general that I've never heard of. Although his martial arts is a little better, it's nothing." The maid Xiao Xian couldn't help but mumble. "Don't talk nonsense." Yalun Nanxian interrupted her. "He's the most capable man in the world. All the others combined can't compare to him." But her tone was a little sad. The two of them had just confirmed their relationship, but she was about to marry into the Xixia. Although the other party had repeatedly promised that he would never marry the Xixia crown prince, but as a member of the royal family, how could she not know how insignificant an individual's strength was in the face of the country's will? Although he was very capable, he was still a man, not a god. This was also the reason why she took the initiative to invite the other party. She just wanted to spend this limited time with her lover, and her only wish was that the road to the Xixia country would be a little further. The maid on the side saw the infatuated look on the Miss face and couldn't help but secretly curl her lips. All the other men combined can't compare to him. No wonder people say that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I really can't understand what's so good about this marrying general. The next day, the diplomatic mission continued on its journey. After the incident last night, everyone was not in good spirits, so Song Qingshu suggested that they travel less today and rest in the nearest town. The other members of the diplomatic mission were naturally happy to agree, and they even praised General Xiao for being considerate to his subordinates. Song Qingshu's main purpose was to meet Yelun Nanxian, but it was also a good idea to win people's hearts along the way. From time to time, he would look back at the princess's carriage, and occasionally, he would see Yelun Nanxian lifting the curtain to peek at him. Their eyes would meet, full of tenderness and sweetness. But this disgusted the maid on the side, Xiao Xian. She always found this guy who had taken over her miss's body and mind very unpleasant. But what made her even more annoyed was that she couldn't do anything to stop it. As for Song Qingshu, who was an eyesore to her at this time, in addition to exchanging flirtatious glances with Yelun Nanxian, he was more concerned about the origin of those people last night and why they wanted to kill Yelun Nanxian. Yelun Nanxian didn't have any enemies in Jianghu, and because of the fall of Yelu Yisin, all the grievances had been sealed in the coffin, so the people who wanted to kill her were most likely to ruin the marriage. Was it the Southern Song dynasty, the Mongolian Empire, or the Xixia country itself? Song Qingshu naturally knew that this was not the plan of the Jin Kingdom and the Manchurian Qing dynasty, so there were only a few possibilities left. But now that the Southern Song dynasty was suffering a crushing defeat in the Northern Expedition and the chaos in Sichuan, they shouldn't have the time to care about this matter. Besides, the Kongtong sect was also involved in this matter, so the Southern Song dynasty shouldn't be able to order her around. Thinking of the heavenly mountain maiden hiding in the dark and spying on them, they didn't know when she would find an opportunity to strike. It was really impossible to guard against. Thinking of her peerless martial arts, Song Qingshu had a headache. Along the way, he still couldn't figure out what was going on. The delegation had already arrived at the small town, where there was no courier station. Of course, because of the previous incident, the group of people still had a lingering fear in their hearts, so they probably wouldn't stay at the courier station again. So they simply booked an inn and stayed there. Song Qingshu summoned the people of the delegation and deliberately strengthened their vigilance. In fact, he didn't need to say anything. Everyone had also raised their vigilance. They were lucky to survive last night, but if they had to do it again, no one could guarantee that they would be as lucky as before. After setting up several layers of defense, Song Qingshu still set up his room next to the commandery princess. With yesterday's incident, no one had any objections. Shangguan Xiaoxian, the only one who knew the truth, could only roll her eyes, but she couldn't tell the others the truth. Although it was still early to stay, Song Qingshu was the general who sent the bride, so he had a lot of things to deal with. Xiao Huandu also came to him from time to time to discuss some things. Although Song Qingshu was annoyed, he could only pretend to be polite. After waiting until midnight, when everyone gradually fell asleep, Song Qingshu ran to the door next door and knocked on it. Shangguan Xiaoxian, who opened the door, saw him and showed an expression of "I knew it." After entering the door and seeing her standing there motionless, Song Qing-shu couldn't help but ask. Aren't you going out? Chapter 1733. Looking at the little handmaiden with a temper, Song Qing-shu found it a little strange. You can sleep in my room next door. The little handmaiden curled her lips. I don't want to sleep in a stinky man's bed. Besides, I'm a pure girl. If I sleep in a man's room in the middle of the night, how can I face others? Song Qing-shu, the little handmaiden continued to snort. And from your appearance, I can tell that you have made a lot of enemies in your daily life. What if someone comes to seek revenge in the middle of the night, and I happen to be sleeping there unluckily? Wouldn't I become your scapegoat? Little girl, you're really sharp-tongued. Song Qing-shu was also very helpless. You're not outside or next door. You can't just stay in the room, right? When I'm intimate with your princess, don't you know what see no see, hear no hear means? The little handmaiden's face flashed a little red. After all, I'm the princess's personal maid. I have to get used to this kind of thing. Song Qing-shu was startled. Only then did she think of the customs of this world. A servant girl like her did not need to avoid anything. Moreover, the wives and concubines of those big families fought for favor. Sometimes, when a master was physically inconvenient, he would let his personal servant girl serve the husband to keep his body and mind. Thinking of this, Song Qing-shu could not help but feel excited. He carefully looked at the handmaiden in front of him. Although she was not beautiful, she had delicate features, red lips, and white teeth. In particular, the collagen on her face showed the attractive youthfulness of a young girl. It is said that capitalism has something to learn. I think the feudal society also has something to learn. Song Qing-shu thought with a strange expression. What are you looking at? Shangguan Xiaoxin's heart skipped a beat when she saw his eyes, and she took a step back guiltily. Song Qing-shu could not help laughing. Now he was no longer the ignorant person he used to be. How could he really have any thoughts about a little handmaiden like her? Since you want to stay, then stay here. Looking at his back as he walked into the inner room, Shangguan Xiaoxian raised her small fist. What do you mean I want to stay here? This is where I live. When Song Qing-shu entered the inner room, his eyes suddenly lit up because at this time, Yelu Nanxian was sitting on the bed, dressed in a bright red wedding dress. Her whole person looked even more charming and enchanting. The candlelight in the room fell on her quiet and beautiful face. The shadow of her long eyelashes could be faintly seen on her face that was as pure as snow. Her eyes were as clear as a spring on a stone. She looked at her quietly. Are you bickering with Xiaoxian again? She could vaguely hear the voice coming from outside the room. Song Qing-shu couldn't help but laugh. Your little handmaiden has quite a character. Yelu Nanxian's eyes shone with a doting light. It's all my fault for spoiling her too much. In fact, in my heart, I never saw her as a maidservant, but more like a younger sister. It's her good fortune to have an older sister like you. Song Qing-shu walked to her side and sat down. He lowered his head and whispered in her ear, Let's not talk about her. Let's talk about our business. Yelu Nanxian blushed and said coquettishly, What business do we have? Looking at her perfect profile through the curtain of beads hanging from the phoenix coronet, her crystal-clear skin, and her rosy lips, Song Qing-shu said, This dress of yours should be the wedding dress that the Great Forest Dental School prepared for you, right? As the general who escorted the bride, he naturally recognized that this wedding dress was the dress she would wear when she came to the Western Xia and married the crown prince. That's right, Yelu Nanxian nodded. But in my heart, there is only one husband, and I will only wear it for him. As she spoke, she looked at her lover beside her. Under her slightly trembling eyelashes, her eyes were long and charming. Nanxian, Song Qing-shu couldn't help but hold her little hand. The most touching thing in the world was a young girl's passionate confession. Sometimes he couldn't help but sigh at himself. How could he be so lucky? Song Lang. At first, Yelu Nanxian wasn't used to it, but in the end, she still called out. Song Qing-shu put one hand around her soft willow-like waist, the other hand supporting her smooth, jade-like chin, and lowered his head. Yelu Nanxian slowly closed her eyes, her long eyelashes slightly trembling, revealing an inexplicable beauty. A young girl's breath was always so sweet and enchanting. Song Qingshu couldn't stop praising her in his heart. Yelu Nanxian's mind was already blank. She could only passively respond. Suddenly, she felt a chill on her body. She opened her eyes slightly and found that the wedding dress on her body had already been taken off. She was shy but also full of admiration. Song Lang's martial arts are really unfathomable. I didn't even notice how he took it off. If Song Qingshu knew that her attention was actually on this, he would definitely laugh and scold her for being a martial arts-obsessed girl. Even in this kind of situation, she was still thinking about martial arts. Of course, Song Qingshu couldn't think of anything else at this time. His attention was completely attracted by the young girl's closed legs. Because she grew up on the prairie, and because she practiced martial arts from a young age, her legs were not only well-proportioned and slender, but also full of a healthy and youthful aura. Song Qingshu had always admired Yelu Nanxian's tall and well-proportioned figure, and had long speculated how perfect her body was under her dress. Unfortunately, the last time in Yangzhou was too chaotic. He could only swallow it in one gulp. He didn't have time to carefully appreciate it. This time, he naturally wouldn't miss it again. Shinji Jintong's sentence that he could play with her legs for a year was really too classic. Song Qingshu found that he couldn't find any other words that could better describe this feeling at this time. TSK, the general who escorts the bride, is actually embezzling the things that are guarding her. If the Western Xia's crown prince knew that his crown princess had already been played with by other men who knows how many times, what do you think his reaction would be? At this time, a teasing voice suddenly sounded. This time, the two of them were scared out of their wits and hurriedly looked towards the source of the voice, only to see a beautiful little girl sitting on the window, a teasing smile on her face, and a pair of legs leisurely swaying there. Heavenly Mountain Tonglao. Song Qingshu secretly blamed himself. Just now, all his attention was on Yelu Nanxian, so he didn't notice the enemy at such a close distance. Of course, this was also because Heavenly Mountain Tonglao's martial arts skills were too high. If it was an ordinary martial arts master, even if he wasn't focused, he would still be able to notice it very quickly. Yelu Nanxian pulled the quilt over her chest. Her eyes were full of shame and indignation. After being seen by this person again and again, she really wasn't in a good mood. "Don't be in a hurry, I have something to say." Seeing that Song Qingshu was about to attack, Heavenly Mountain Tonglao hurriedly said. At the same time, a serious expression appeared on her face, and her pair of swaying legs returned to the window, ready to attack at any time. Song Qingshu couldn't be bothered to listen to what she had to say, and in a flash, he was already in front of her. After all, the relationship between him and Yelu Nanxian was very important. If it was leaked out, it would be very troublesome. "Stinking brat, do you not understand what I'm saying?" Heavenly Mountain Tonglao angrily scolded, but soon she didn't have the energy to talk and could only focus on dealing with the unpredictable attacks of her opponent. This time, Song Qingshu's first attack was Sword Chi, because he knew that other martial arts would be easily countered by the Heavenly Mountain Plum snapping hand, so he used his strongest attack. Combined with his peerless movement technique, he moved up and down, left and right, attacking his opponent from 365 degrees without any blind spots. Heavenly Mountain Tonglao's heart was in turmoil. With last night's experience, although the opponent's Sword Chi was difficult to deal with, it wasn't impossible to defend against. She originally thought that there wasn't much of a difference between the two of them, but now that his feet could move, she realized how wrong she was. His movement technique was too terrifying. One moment he was in front of her, and the next moment he appeared behind her or above her. Even when she tried her best, she couldn't see how he moved. It was as if he was teleporting. If it wasn't for her 90 years of cultivation and experience, she might have lost the moment they fought. Even so, she knew that she couldn't hold on for long, so she quickly moved to the corner of the wall. She made up her mind that as long as she used the wall as a shield, she wouldn't be attacked from behind or from the side. She only needed to focus on the attack from above, and the pressure was instantly reduced by a few times. When she finally retreated to the corner of the wall, Heavenly Mountain Tonglau's lips curled up slightly. She had neutralized her opponent's attack by a few times, and she was already looking for an opportunity to counterattack. Unexpectedly, her opponent suddenly disappeared, and Heavenly Mountain Tonglau calmly attacked upwards. As she was hiding in the corner where the two walls intersected, her opponent could only attack from above her head. However, the smile on her face suddenly froze, because when she looked up, her opponent didn't appear above her head. Where did he go? Heavenly Mountain Tonglao instantly had goosebumps, but before she could react, the wall behind her suddenly shattered, and the power of the One Yang finger sealed her major acupoints. How was this possible? At this point, how could she not understand that after her opponent disappeared, he directly appeared outside the house, and then sealed her acupoints through the wall? As she instinctively thought that her side and back were safe, she didn't defend herself at all, and her opponent's attack hit her. However, she still couldn't understand. There were two thick walls around them, and even the window was far away. How did he appear outside in an instant? Song Qing-shu reappeared in the house, and he looked at the dumbfounded Heavenly Mountain Tonglao. He couldn't help but laugh. I finally caught you. Actually, if Heavenly Mountain Tonglao didn't think she was smart enough to hide in the corner and completely give up defending her back and side, with her martial arts, even if he used all his strength, he would have to spend a lot of effort to take her down. What kind of martial arts is this? How can you teleport outside the house? Heavenly Mountain Tonglao was still in a daze, but she was experienced and knowledgeable, so she quickly realized that it was a high-level martial art, and she wasn't seeing a ghost. Chapter 1734. So close, yet so far apart. Just like the name. Heaven Mountain Tonglao's martial arts had reached the peak of the man in the painting, and she seemed to have understood something. Your martial arts are definitely not the same as Nameless. Who are you? Huh, your appearance has changed? Song Qing-shu then remembered that he had just been intimate with Yelu Nanxian, and he couldn't wear a mask, so he revealed his true face. Now you have to understand your situation. You are my captive, and I'm the only one who can ask you questions. You have no right to ask me. Brat, Heaven Mountain Tonglao had always been hot-tempered, but normally she could kill those people with a wave of her hand. But this person in front of her, she couldn't defeat him, and she couldn't even resist. Thinking of this, she became even more depressed, but she had already made up her mind. She wouldn't let him get any information out of her. Heaven Mountain Tonglao's unyielding character was no joke. But to her surprise, he didn't ask her any questions. Instead, he came over and sealed her other major acupoints. What are you doing? Heaven Mountain Tonglao shouted angrily. Her mute acupoint was also sealed. Song Qing-shu sighed. The 8 desolations and 6 directions supremacy skill you are practicing is really amazing. It actually changed your meridians to be different from those of ordinary people. This was also why he sealed her acupoints again. After all, with the previous experience, he was worried that she would break through her acupoints again. Woo, woo, woo. Heaven Mountain Tonglao's mute acupoint was sealed, and she could only make some meaningless sounds. Wait, I have more important things to do now. I will find you later. As he said this, he grabbed her by the collar and threw her behind the screen. Heaven Mountain Tonglao was petite and looked like a little girl from the outside. It was as if she was being carried by her parents. She had never been treated like this before, and she felt extremely humiliated. At this time, Shengwan Xiaoxian also came in from the outside while rubbing her eyes. I think I heard the sound of fighting. Did something happen? She had been guarding outside for the whole night, so she was especially sleepy today. Song Qing-shu was speechless. He thought to himself that this guy could really sleep. If something really happened, by the time he reacted, his princess would have already been kidnapped. It's nothing. Go back to sleep. Song Qing-shu pressed her face and pushed her back. Oh, Shangwan Xiaoxian mumbled. Before she walked out, she turned around and added, although the commandery princess has been practicing martial arts since she was a child, she is still a virgin. She can't withstand your torment. Be gentle. Song Qing-shu, Yellow Nancian, returning to Yellow Nancian's side. Song Qing-shu's face was gloomy. Maid, what are you thinking about all day long? She must have heard the sound of his battle with Heaven Mountain Tong Lao and mistakenly thought that he was fighting with her master. Yellow Nancian also didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Tell her to read less nonsense in the future. She was wrapped in a quilt in front of her chest, revealing her fair shoulders and delicate collarbone. Under the candlelight, she looked even more lovely. Song Qing-shu's heart skipped a beat. He leaned over and said, "Forget about her. Let's continue." Behind the screen, Heaven Mountain Tong Lao's eyes widened. He said he had more important things to do. Was this what he meant? How can we do that? Yellow Nancian was also anxious. She looked over at the screen and said, "Heaven Mountain Tong Lao is still there." Heaven Mountain Tong Lao secretly nodded. This little girl is quite sensible. No wonder I want to take her as my maid. Song Qing-shu smiled. Don't worry about her. I've already sealed her acupuncture point. He wasn't lying. He had indeed sealed Heaven Mountain Tong Lao's acupuncture point. He just didn't seal her sleeping acupuncture point. Behind the screen, Heaven Mountain Tong Lao was dumbfounded. What is this brat trying to do? Being misled by his ambiguous words, Yellow Nancian subconsciously thought that Heaven Mountain Tong Lao had fainted. She shyly hummed. Hearing her sweet humph, Heaven Mountain Tong Lao was enraged. This little slut is so shameless. She had completely forgotten that she had admired him just now. Song Qing-shu didn't have time to care about Heaven Mountain Tong Lao's thoughts. His attention was completely focused on the beauty in front of him. Yellow Nancian held the quilt in front of her chest with one hand. The other hand tightly gripped the hem of her dress, covering her bare legs. It was as if she was sending out a silent invitation. No man could resist this kind of temptation. Song Qing-shu was no exception. However, he didn't panic. Instead, he stretched out his hand and sucked the wine cup into his hand. How could Song Qing-shu not guess what she was thinking when he saw her deliberately wearing a wedding dress tonight? With their identities, it was destined that it would be difficult for them to formally bow to heaven and earth and get married. This was the only way to satisfy her wish and longing as a woman. Just now, in the heat of the moment, he almost forgot. He couldn't make the same mistake again. "Madam, let's have a cup of wine." Song Qing-shu poured a cup of wine and handed it to her. Yellow Nancian was pleasantly surprised. She didn't expect her lover to be so considerate. She took the wine cup and said affectionately, "Husband," behind the screen, if it wasn't for the fact that Heaven Mountain Tong Lao's acupuncture point was sealed, she would have already started cursing at them. "You two are clearly an adulterous couple. Why are you pretending to be a couple?" After finishing the cup of wine, Song Qing-shu reached out to remove the pearls on her phoenix coronet. His fingertips felt the girl's supple skin. As his fingers slid down, he could clearly feel the girl's body trembling. He couldn't help but feel pity for her, and his actions became gentler. A girl like Yellow Nancian couldn't resist his familiar flirting methods. In a flash, her eyes became misty and her body went soft. Her moist lips were still murmuring, "Don't be like this, you'll alert Xiaoxian outside." Behind the screen, Heavenly Mountain Tong Lao was so angry that she almost fainted. She thought to herself, "Your maid is sleeping soundly right now. What did I do to deserve to be here and listen to you too lovey-dovey?" Song Qing-shu knew that she was just being reserved, instinctively rejecting him. Of course, he wouldn't take it seriously. Not long after, Yellow Nancian's slender and delicate arms wrapped around his neck. Her whole body was soft and warm as she pressed against him. Behind the screen, Heaven Mountain Tong Lao heard all kinds of flirtatious sounds. She was so angry that she cursed the two of them countless times. This woman really doesn't know shame. She's so flirtatious at such a young age. She's almost as good as that bitch Li Qiushui. Also, is this brat a pervert? He sealed my acupuncture point for muting, but not my acupuncture point for sleeping. He's making me listen to these disgusting sounds? I would explode. But after the initial anger, Heaven Mountain Tong Lao's expression suddenly became strange. Although she wasn't young anymore, she was still a virgin. She had never experienced something like this before. Unknowingly, her face turned red and her body turned soft. She unconsciously clamped her legs together. Feeling the strange feeling in her body, she cursed Song Qing-shu countless times in her heart. After an unknown period of time, Heaven Mountain Tonglao felt like she was about to collapse. It was as if she had just been fished out of the water and was half awake. Suddenly, she felt a dark shadow in front of her. She opened her eyes subconsciously and found Song Qing-shu standing in front of her, looking down at her. Woo, woo, woo. Heaven Mountain Tonglao was very angry, but she couldn't say anything. Song Qing-shu looked at Heaven Mountain Tonglao with a strange expression. Her cheeks were red, her eyes were watery, and her pink lips exuded a seductive glow. Her whole body seemed to be drenched in sweat, causing her dress to stick tightly to her body. What a beautiful little girl. Song Qing-shu couldn't help but praise her, but he quickly restrained his thoughts. He kept telling himself that this person in front of him was an old monster, and he shouldn't have any other thoughts. At this time, Yalu Nancian had already fallen asleep. Song Qing-shu was worried that he would wake her up. Of course, he was even more worried that she would find out that there was an audience here. So, like an eagle carrying a chick, he carried her to the room next door. As soon as her acupuncture point was unsealed, Heaven Mountain Tonglao cursed. "You bastard! How dare you make me listen to these disgusting things? Are you done? If you continue, I'll hit your mute acupoint and sell you to the brothel in town." Song Qing-shu rolled his eyes at her and poured himself a glass of water to replenish the energy he had just consumed. "You!" Heaven Mountain Tonglao was furious, but she really didn't dare to curse anymore. If her acupuncture point was sealed and she was thrown to the brothel, she would be in trouble. She was a member of the underworld, so she naturally knew about the darkness in this world. She also knew how attractive her current appearance was to men. When she thought of herself being thrown into a group of men without any ability to resist, she shuddered at the thought of that scene. That's a good girl. Song Qing-shu found that he really liked to see the little girl in front of him angry. But when he remembered that she was actually an antique, his expression instantly became quite conflicted. Ahem. After calming himself down, he continued, "Now you can tell me who hired you to kill Yalu Nancian." The reason why he let her listen in the room for so long was because he wanted to find another way to break down her mental defenses. Moreover, listening to such things was also a physical task, which could be seen from the sweat all over her body. When the time came, it would be relatively easier to ask questions when both her body and mind were exhausted. Heaven Mountain Tonglao gave him a disdainful look, then turned her head away, obviously not planning to answer him. "Looks like you really want to be sold to the brothel." Song Qing-shu's voice instantly became cold. Tianshan Tongra sneered. Apparently, she had completely calmed down. "Since you can cultivate your martial arts to such a level, you are obviously not a despicable and shameless person. I believe you would not do such a thing. Moreover, if you do such a thing, aren't you afraid that your son with a girl named Nancian will not have an asshole?" Song Qing-shu was choked by her words, but he quickly reacted and fiercely said, "That's right, I will not send you to the brothel. It's not for the reason you think, it's because I can't bear to." Chapter 1735. Heavenly Mountain Tonglao's face instantly turned red. "Shameless." Song Qing-shu rubbed his fingers as if he was reminiscing the feeling just now. "It's okay if you don't want me to be shameless, as long as you answer my questions properly." Heavenly Mountain Tonglao still turned her face away, looking like she was not cooperating at all. "Then I have no choice." Song Qing-shu directly walked over and grabbed her leg. He took off her shoes and revealed a small and delicate foot. "What are you doing?" Heavenly Mountain Tonglao screamed. She was finally panicking. "I have to show you what I'm made of, or else you'll think I'm kitty." Although Song Qing-shu did not like Zhang Wuji in this life, he had to admit that the trick of tickling someone's acupoint was the quickest to achieve results, and it did not seem too despicable. While responding to Heavenly Mountain Tonglao, He reached out his finger and touched the Yongquan acupoint at the center of her foot. His internal energy was so powerful that it had already surpassed Zhang Wuji's, and his control of the internal energy was even better than hers. The Yongquan acupoint was located in the center of the foot, and it was the beginning of the foot Shaoyin kidney meridian. It was the most sensitive point. Usually, children would scratch the soles of their partner's feet with their fingers, and it would numb their bodies. But now, he was rubbing her Yongquan acupoint with his joyful true qi, and it was 100 times more painful than scratching with a feather. After a few strokes, Heavenly Mountain Tonglao could not help but giggle. She wanted to move her feet, but her acupoint was sealed, and she could not move at all. The pain was far worse than being cut by knives and whips. It felt like millions of fleas were crawling and gnawing at her internal organs, bone marrow, and blood vessels. It was even worse than when the life-death note was activated. She only laughed a few times, and then she cried out in pain. Heavenly Mountain Tonglao's heart almost jumped out of her chest, and even the hair on her body was so itchy that it felt like it was going to fall off. She cursed, "Brat. One day I will cut you into 1,000 pieces, 1,000 pieces. All right, spare me, woo-woo." At first, she was quite stubborn and cursed, but later on, it turned into begging for mercy. In the end, she couldn't even beg for mercy and could only sob. Song Qingshu was dumbfounded at this time because Tianshan Tongra's voice was still that old voice at the beginning. Later on, when she begged for mercy and cried, it unknowingly turned into a soft and sweet voice. Could it really be a ghost? Song Qingshu felt a chill run down his spine, and a story instantly appeared in his mind. An old monster's lifespan was coming to an end, and he was unwilling to die just like that. So he finally took over the body of a little lowly and continued to exist in this world by possessing her body. With revered Ming as an example, it wouldn't be strange for such a thing to happen. Next, I'll ask you a question and you'll answer it. Do you agree or not? Song Qingshu asked. Tianshan Tonglao cried, I promise. Only then did Song Qingshu let go of her and massage the acupoints on her body, completely dispelling the unbearable numbness and itchiness. Who sent you here? There were still a few crystal-clear tear stains on Tianshan Tonglao's face. Perhaps it was because of the agitation just now. Her skin was fair and rosy. It was really a pitiful sight. If someone who didn't know what was going on saw this, their heart would definitely melt because of this cute little lowly. However, Song Qingshu wasn't fooled by her appearance and continued to stare at her fiercely. Tianshan Tonglao was a little hesitant, but when she thought of the feeling just now, she didn't want to experience it again. She could only answer, Actually, no one sent me here. I'm just working with someone. Working with who? Song Qingshu nodded. How could a person like Tianshan Tonglao be driven around by others? The possibility of working with someone was higher. Prince Tianshan Tonglao answered, Anyway, as long as that slut Li Qiushui isn't at peace, I'll be happy to do it. Li Liangzhua. Song Qingshu thought to himself. According to the information he received, this Li Liangzhua should be a free prince who is dedicated to pursuing immortality. Why would he lay his hands on the future crown princess? Wait, he seems to be cultivating on Mount Kongtong. Song Qingshu thought to himself. Thinking of the Kongtong sex experts who used the 7 wounds fist that night, Song Qingshu no longer had any doubts. Song Qingshu continued to ask a few more questions, and Tianshan Tonglao answered them one by one, solving many of his doubts. However, she knew very little about Li Liangzhua, so it was difficult for her to understand why Li Liangzhua would do something like this. Seeing that he could not get any more information out of her, Song Qingshu changed the topic. Oh yes, what's wrong with your voice? Why does it sound old one minute and like this the next? Tianshan Tonglao was shocked and touched her throat subconsciously. Only then did she realize that she had been speaking in a cute Lolita voice. Her expression changed, but in the end, she told the truth. You know that I'm the Supreme Lord of the Misty Peaks Vulture Palace, the Tianshan Tonglao who kills without a second move. The people under me in the 36 islands and 72 caves are all well-known figures in the underworld. If I reveal my original voice, it would be difficult for them to be afraid of me. They might even laugh at me behind my back. So, I purposely used an old voice to maintain the dignity of superior. Song Qing-shu was stunned and could not help but laugh. You mean to say that your real voice is like this, and you purposely pretended to be old in order to make others afraid of you? Tianshan Tonglao blushed, not knowing if she was embarrassed or angry. Look, you are laughing at me now. This time, Song Qing-shu laughed from the bottom of his heart. I think your cute Lolita voice is very cute. Much better than before when you sounded like an old monster. Humph. Tianshan Tonglao directly turned her head away, showing the back of her head to him. She had no choice. She could not beat him in a fight, and she did not dare to scold him now. Looking at the sulking little girl in front of him, Song Qing-shu suddenly stopped smiling. Are you really Tianshan Tonglao? Tianshan Tonglao suddenly turned her head and stared at him fiercely. What did you say? Song Qing-shu quickly smiled again. Nothing, I was just asking. Tianshan Tonglao then said, Actually, we are not enemies. On the contrary, we have a common enemy. Oh, please tell me more. Song Qing-shu sat down calmly and poured a cup of water for himself to moisten his throat. Then he poured a cup of water for Tianshan Tonglao and handed it to her. Here, do you want some? Facing this kind of sigh, let's eat. Heavenly Mountain Tonglao really wanted to reject his charity, but she was sweating all over and had cried and laughed for a long time. Her mouth was already dry, and in the end, she could not resist the desire of her body. She took the cup from his hand. After taking a sip, Tianshan Tonglao felt a little better and then said, Our enemy is the crown prince of the Xixia country, and you and the crown princess of the Xixia country. You are in love with each other, but this love is destined to be tolerated by the world. When you arrive at the Xixia country, the crown prince will marry the crown princess soon. What will you do then? She originally wanted to say that they were a pair of adulterers, but she was worried that she would be punished again, so she reluctantly changed to a euphemistic way. You don't have to worry about this. It's not like you haven't seen my kung fu. A mere crown prince of the Xixia country is nothing to me. In the worst case, I can take Yalun Nanxian and go far away. Song Qing-shu said lightly. Tianshan Tonglao was stunned, but she was so experienced that she would not be fooled by a few words. If you can really take her and go far away, you would have taken her a long time ago. Why would you send her all the way to the Xixia country? I don't know what difficulties you have or what plans you have, but I know it is absolutely possible for us to join hands. Song Qing-shu smiled. You are really smart. Well, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. In that case, you can go now. Then he waved his hand, and a few gusts of wind from his fingers unsealed her acupoints. You just let me go like this? Tianshan Tonglao had prepared a lot of excuses, but she never expected that he would let her go so easily. Song Qing-shu raised his eyebrows. What? You don't want to go? Tianshan Tonglao waved her hands like a rattle drum. Of course not. Are you kidding me? If I stay with this bastard, I can't guarantee that I'll be played to death. That terrifying feeling still lingers in my heart when I think about it. Seeing that she was about to disappear through the door, Song Qing-shu spoke again. Oh right, there is something I need to remind you. What? Tianshan Tonglao turned around, thinking that it would not be so simple. She could not help but look at him warily. It's nothing. Song Qing-shu smiled. I just want to remind you to come to me every year to get the antidote for the 3-corpse brain pill. I'm afraid that you will accidentally forget, and it will be a tragedy when the corpse worm breaks out of its shell. The 3-corpse brain pill of the Blackwood Cliff? Tianshan Tonglao's expression changed drastically. In the world, this was a vicious hidden weapon that was comparable to her talisman of life and death. How could she not know about it? However, she quickly calmed down. I'm not poisoned. Why should I come to you for the antidote? She had already made up her mind. If the other party were to force her to take the poison, she would definitely not let him have his way, even if it cost her life. After all, she was the palace lord of the Vulture Palace, who was renowned throughout the world. She still had that much confidence. Didn't you just drink it? Song Qing smiled like a fox. A trace of confusion appeared in Tianshan Tonglau's eyes at first. Then she realized that she had just drunk a glass of water from him. Her expression changed drastically, but she still remained calm. Since when can the three-corpse brain pill be dissolved in water? One should know that the three-corpse brain pill was usually consumed in one pill, and she had never heard of the pill being dissolved in water. The key to the three corpses brain pill lies in the dormant corpses' worms and the medicine to suppress them. The corpses' worms are very small to begin with. As for the medicine to suppress them, it doesn't have to be wrapped in the form of a pill. It can be dissolved in water and swallowed to suppress the corpses' worms as well. It should be known that some people of high status in the Sun Moon sect, such as Saintess Renanying, were not allowed to take the three corpses brain pill so brutally. Under such circumstances, the sect leader would use a similar method to make them take the three corpses brain pill silently. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.